Good afternoon, everyone. I think we're ready to get started. So this is the second hearing that we've had in the last couple of weeks related to the Medical Cannabis Ad Hoc Committee and the bill we have before us, which is Senate Bill 423. And so what we're going to do today, we're going to do it a little bit different. We've got a lot of people here. We've got a lot of people that are online. And we want to make sure that everyone gets their message heard. So what we're going to do is we're going to have 3-minute limit on speaking. And we'll just see how that goes. Typically in the past, that's worked pretty well. You can get a lot said in 3 minutes, more than you think. So we're gonna go ahead and start going through the list, and we'll go ahead and get started. What we do have a doctor that's with us who was out of town last week, Dr. Bill Lynch. Okay. Would you like to go ahead and take the podium for us? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Appreciate you having me today. I actually am out of town. I'm actually an advanced clinical pharmacist from Jefferson Health System in the Philadelphia area, where I serve as adjunct faculty at the Rowan School of Osteopathic Medicine, our Department of Emergency Medicine, and also precept for Rutgers College of Pharmacy, St. Joseph's College of Pharmacy, and also Thomas Jefferson. So we have recreational marijuana and medical marijuana already approved in New Jersey, and I can tell you what we're seeing there. So marijuana and THC is associated with psychosis and schizophrenia, definitively, proven by Bradford Hill criteria. Bradford Hill criteria was used to show that tobacco actually causes lung cancer, so it meets those criteria. It's also associated with depression and suicidal ideation. We see plenty of this all the time coming into our hospital. The question is not how many cases, not if we'll have cases when I go to work, it's a matter of how many. Marijuana cannabis increases significantly violent behavior. Our doctors are surprised by people only testing positive for THC in their urine and not other substances. It's all driven by the high potency that's out there. The percentage of those who use drugs will become addicted to other substances. They do move on. There's no doubt that people who use marijuana move on to other substances. Not everyone who is a person who uses marijuana becomes a heroin or fentanyl addict, but 92% of them who do will tell you that marijuana is in their previous drug history, which is a concern. Marijuana THC poisonings are an alarming rate. You'll see this especially with toddlers. They get a hold of the edibles, the gummy bears, those kind of things. But they can be significant, up to including hospitalization, intensive care unit intubation, where they're put on intubation for breathing, and also they can potentially die from that, and that has occurred. It's documented in the literature. There's also cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. It's called scromiting. There are published reported cases of fatalities from that. You get such electrolyte imbalance for your heart that you actually have all kinds of problems with regards to cannabis hyperemesis syndrome as well, which can also be pretty significant. Significant drug interactions. That's our world as a practicing clinical pharmacist. We've had students from all three colleges look at this. We've actually put this together as a significant presentation. There are 96 classes of drugs interacting with THC and 61 classes of drugs with CBD. That's over 600 different types of drug interactions. There's significant negative effects on cardiovascular health. Marijuana is not kind to the heart. And the reason I bring that up is because to tell you those stories. So we had a gentleman who came in, 23 years of age. He runs up the stairs, gets short of breath. He's driving out on this car. He starts having chest pain. He comes to our hospital. Fortunately, as an EKG done, our ED doc notices that on V2, V3, which is one vector of a 16-lead EKG, he has a slight T-wave inversion. He has Welland's syndrome. He uses marijuana twice a week. That's it. Problem is, Welland's syndrome is actually your coronary artery at the very top getting stenotic, which is hardening. And now, when he actually uses marijuana, he gets coronary vasospasm. It occludes. He's 80% occluded, has to be rushed for a cardiac stent at 23 years of age. We have a 22-year-old who actually is at home smoking marijuana, has an asthma attack. What's he do? He hit his albuterol inhaler. Problem is, albuterol raises your heart rate, so does cannabis. Now he has significant tachycardia and comes to the hospital. Now, because it's so bad, he hits his albuterol inhaler even more. He goes into full-blown atrial fibrillation and has to go to intensive care unit for 4 days. Our cardiology practice at Jefferson will tell you that recreational marijuana has been the best thing that's ever happened to them. They're flooded with the number of cardiology patients because of the fact that literally having to be hospitalized in their teens, 20s, and 30s from having this. Gentleman writhing in pain from vaping marijuana. Excruciating chest pain, comes in hospital. Still has a chest pain. EKG now is normal, though. So the question is, what's going on with him? We draw troponin. That's an enzyme you'll spill in your blood having a heart attack. Should be less than 18. His first one's 936. He spikes at 14,000. major heart attack at 30 years of age because of the coronary artery vasospasm that marijuana is notorious for. Then it redilates, but the damage is already done. I mean, significant cases with regards to this. Also, marijuana is linked to contamination. There's actually aspergillus, when everyone says it's going to be controlled, fungal infections, these things are controlled. Marijuana is also a major scavenger in the soil of heavy metals. So people will test positive for higher levels of cadmium and lead in their blood and in their urine from the poisoning from the plant, just because the plant sucks it up out of the soil. Negative cardiovascular health, 2 times risk of lung cancer is notorious. Marijuana for testicular cancer, 3 major trials showing that if individuals use marijuana at 18 years of age or younger once a week, they triple their risk for testicular cancer. Significant with regards to what can happen to young men. Cannabis also increases, and this has been shown with cancer registries, those states that have recreationally, medically or recreationally available, where it is more readily available, have higher rates of pediatric cancers and higher rates of increase in those states where it is more readily available. Documented, published data. Also, cannabis is the leading cause for a major childhood cancer called acute lymphoid leukemia. That accounts for 20% of all pediatric cancers. And marijuana has been linked to causing ALL. Opiate and opiate-related deaths go up. People refer to the Buck-Hoover paper. If you have medical marijuana, your opiate deaths go down. That was the first publication. Look at the Shover paper after that that shows you when it's available that actually those death rates go up. So the 23% decrease was a 21% increase in opiate deaths, and that was actually a 44% shift in the negative direction, which is huge. Also shown that with another published paper by Dr. Fink out of Colorado and his colleagues, that opiate deaths go up and fentanyl deaths go up, where marijuana is available compared to those states where it is not. Marijuana leads to engaging other substance of abuse. It's also among high school students. If I want to know who is going to progress onto other substances, marijuana is the leading of 2 of the 3 factors. 1, lifetime use ever, and also use within the last 30 days. Shows that those individuals progress on. What most people are surprised about from the DAWN data, which is a drug awareness warning network for emergency departments, again, being part of the Department of Emergency Medicine, is that we actually see this in that alcohol is first at the top 10 drugs driving people to emergency rooms. Methamphetamine, this is across the country, is second. Marijuana is third, ahead of fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, methadone, Xanax, you name it. Marijuana is third in causing that. The other thing is cannabis is related to induce psychological behavior with regards to chromosomal changes. So when men or women use this, fathers or mothers, in the future, fathers with a DLCAP2 gene change cause autism in their children, linked to marijuana use. Chromosomal genetic diseases also include Down syndrome, Klinefelters, Hunters, Turners. Marijuana is linked to pediatric cancers, which we talked about, and also all kinds of cognitive issues, addiction, dependence, and withdrawal, psychosis, schizophrenia is most disturbing. If an individual comes to the hospital with a psychotic event, because of that's marijuana-induced, cannabis-induced psychosis called, acutely, their chances of transitioning to schizophrenia within 3 years, based on their age or gender, is 20 to 40%. To transition to schizophrenia within 3 years. A major publication and finding. It is linked to suicide. 51% of those who die from suicide in Colorado who were 10 to 19 years of age test positive as a decedent in their system to have marijuana on board. 51%, even more so than alcohol. It's sobering for violence. Who was Dylan Roof, your Charleston Bible study shooter, marijuana, the Zarnev brothers, marijuana user, who was the first person that the person shot at Uvalde, Texas, his grandmother, because she wouldn't let him use marijuana. I mean, significant violence was because of this. The reason I bring all that up is because of the fact that, well, do we really see this? And we do. We do. And what happens is that we'll hear all the time is, whether someone wants to use marijuana, that's of their own accord. It's not going to affect me. I don't want to use it. I'm never going to use it. But if somebody else wants to, that's okay. Well, the question is, what about the untoward consequences? So we're going to tell you about Mr. Nice. Mr. Nice was one of our patients who came in one
Dr.
night.
Lynch.
It's just one more story.
Okay.
It's one more story.
All right, thank you.
And it's really to sum it up. So what
Thank you.
happening was, he came in because he was chopping wood and having chest pain. He comes to the hospital. Meanwhile, someone came in with a cannabis-induced psychosis. She was lucky if she weighed 110 pounds soaking wet, but because of her violent behavior, she kicked one of our nurses in the face, broke his cheekbone, kicked another nurse in the ribs, broke her ribs, kicked another technician, knocked her down, and has stitches. So now we're down 3 patients to take care of people, and Mr. Nice is waiting in the waiting room with his chest pain from chopping wood. except when we finally get him back into there, his troponins through the roof, and he's having a major evolving heart attack. And we've been delayed in taking care of him because the person came with cannabis-induced psychosis and who then injured 3 of our employees because of her behavior. That's unfortunately what happens every night I go to work in the state of New Jersey with cannabis. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share this information with all of you today, and we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for coming all the way from New Jersey to visit with us in South Carolina. Next up, we have. Yes, sir. Do you have a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
I did too.
Thank you, Dr. Lynch.
Sure.
My question, you said you were from New Jersey and that y'all have recreational and medical marijuana is legal. Does the hospital you work at prescribe medical marijuana?
That's a great question. So being a practicing clinical pharmacist, marijuana cannot be prescribed. Now, you can have a physician request that someone gets it, and they go to a dispensary, and they get their marijuana with a medical card, but it is truly not prescribed in that I do not get a prescription, and I do not fill a medical marijuana prescription. It's filled by a dispensary. In addition to that, our hospital, Jefferson Health System, and along with Cleveland Clinic, do not allow marijuana, if someone has it, to be used in our hospital at all, no matter what formulation they have, whatever. We have other medication that we can use to treat whatever their ailment is. I know you're considering a medical bill here in particular for that. We serve in the Pain Management Addiction Committee at Jefferson. We have plenty of other modalities that we can use to treat those things. But with regards to the actual question of it being prescribed, it is not truly written on a prescription and given to me to fill. What's interesting about that is that it is being considered by the federal government to change the scheduling from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3. If that happens, if they would follow the federal registry, the only professionals who could dispense a controlled release substance are pharmacists. Not physicians, not nurses. They could in the hospital, but it would have to be dispensed from us to them to give out. That's where that would lead to. And it'd be interesting to see how they plan on following that with regards to the shortage of pharmacists to begin with. But as far as it being prescribed, it's not really a prescribed product. It's truly written for a medical card that they have to qualify for, and then a dispensary gives it out. It's not given out by a pharmacy. Pharmacy, and we do give out Epidiolex, CBD, for pediatric seizures. That is prescribed. And we also give out dronabinol, which is Marinol, which is actually synthetic THC that we do give out for nausea, vomiting, chemotherapy, cachexia, that kind of stuff. Those 2 formulations of a marijuana product are prescribed, and I do dispense them, and I have given them out in my career, but the rest of it, that's not prescribed or dispensed by me.
Representative, sorry, did you have a follow-up?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Representative Jones, did you have a question?
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Lynch, you gave us several examples of things that have happened where you are. But in those examples, were the majority of those persons who were using it recreationally?
Most of the time, yes, because what's interesting in our hospital is when I work weekends especially, we'll get asked the question, why do we see all these people from Pennsylvania, and especially the Philadelphia area? So Ben Salem, Philadelphia, Delaware County, that kind of stuff. And we get asked that question. So you really asked me that question? We see them because Pennsylvania does not have recreational marijuana approved. They come over, they buy it in New Jersey, they use it, they can't tolerate it, and now they're in our emergency room. And that's what we see mostly is because that does not mean you can't have some of these cardiovascular events and mind-altering events happen from medically prescribed, but most of the time it's recreational use, the potency is not controlled, people don't know what's in there, and the thing is, but like, we do confirm with a lot of these reactions through the urine drug screen, and we test for multiple substances, that the only thing they're testing positive for is THC, and that's how we do know that that seems to be the culprit in a lot of these situations that occur.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lynch. We
Sure.
appreciate you being here today.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you. Next up. Mr. Sessions, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Did you mention that you can prescribe synthetic THC?
There's actually a formulation called Marinol that's actually THC. It's approved by the federal government. It went through the clinical trials. And one of the things I actually failed to mention is that if you actually come and all of you where you were and you're looking at me through the window of the pharmacy, behind me you would see thousands, and I mean thousands of medications. And the question is they all have 2 things in common. 2 well-controlled pivotal trials that show that those substances that I'm prescribing or using work for the indication they're for the medical condition, and some semblance of a safety profile. With regards to marijuana, that has happened. CBD, Epidiolex, is approved for certain types of seizures, Dravet and Lennox-Gastaut pediatric seizures, and also Dronabinol has been approved for nausea and vomiting that's severe enough from chemotherapy that patients can't tolerate other antiemetics, medication we use for them not to throw up or have severe nausea. And also can be used for cachexia if people have failure to thrive, they're not eating, those kind of things that stimulates appetite. So everyone knows about that, that's what THC does. So we use it. Those two products do exist and are approved prescriptions that I do give out and dispense at the hospital. But they're the only two that are quote unquote an isolated form for marijuana that we use.
And just a brief follow-up, those are both synthetic?
Well, Epidiolex is actually is made from the plant, so
Okay.
it's actually CBD isolated from it, and then THC is actually synthetically derived, where you can, I mean, you can make, you can take the product and you can make THC. I mean, you can make, lots of things nowadays synthetically, but that's what we actually have, and it's derived from that formulation. But that's the issue you have now with the hemp bill, in that a lot of other psychoactive derived cannabinoid products are not synthetic. They're actually derived from the plant. Cannabigerol, hexahydrocannabinol, delta-8, all of those, they're all truly from the plant, and now they can be isolated out. But we don't use them medically currently.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
All right, we good? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Appreciate it. Next up, we have Ms. Sherry Lynn Kaufman, I believe.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for listening to me. Oh, sorry. Good afternoon. My name's Sherry Lynn Kaufman, and I'm a constituent newly residing in Lexington County. Please bear with me as I share my testimony with you. I'm just a little nervous. Okay, sorry. Tomorrow, I will be 62 years young, and I've been fighting the challenges of multiple sclerosis for 32 years. Even though I look pretty darn good externally, the road has been quite rocky. My experiences with MS have been temporary blindness in my right eye, which is called optic neuritis, violent seizures, and what I call a full throttle relapse. That's a complete system shutdown. You can't walk, talk, or control your elimination process. As difficult as this sounds to have had experience, one of the most painful and debilitating symptoms are the muscle spasms, the MS hug. It's not loving or kind. The spasms are crippling, sharp, piercing, stabbing, and sometimes burning. Some of the medications to prescribe to treat them are gabapentin, Flexeril, baclofen, or the big dogs, oxycodone or Percocet. I'm not a drug user. I never smoked in my childhood or drank or did any of those things. And those drugs create problems damaging your organs and create dependency. While living in New York City, which is where I'm originally from, my doctor prescribed me the medical cannabis, which allowed me to obtain relief from the pain without all the side effects. Last week, I had a mini relapse, and since I've been having muscle spasms, the doctor prescribed me baclofen that I prefer not to take, but I have no choice. I rather have a natural source of choice. And I'm asking you today to give me a choice. Support the Compassionate Care Act S423. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Mr. Colin Kelly, I think, online. Can you hear us okay? Right, you need to, I
Yes,
think
I
you
can.
need to turn, okay, good. Go ahead, please.
Wonderful. I think I need to, do I need to mute?
No, you're good.
Yeah, okay, wonderful. Chairwoman Davis, members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Colin Kelly with Palmetto Remedies. I am here in support of Senate Bill 423. This bill will bring forward a responsible medical cannabis program in South Carolina. Studies show that programs like this provide clean, safe, tested, and regulated medicine to patients in need while having some positive societal impacts. The studies have shown these include drop in opioid use and overdose deaths, lower violent crime rates, reduction in illicit market drug sales, and higher property values in the vicinity of cannabis businesses, all while keeping teen drug use at similar or even lower levels, some studies indicating an 8% drop in teen drug use. On the horizon is the move for cannabis to be rescheduled from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. So from no medical value like heroin or LSD to Schedule 3 along the lines of Tylenol with codeine, gabapentin, and others. As an example, I had back surgery a couple years ago and was prescribed gabapentin for my post-surgical recovery. And similarly, in this rescheduling, cannabis could be used and could be prescribed by a physician. This is all based on a HHS recommendation, based on a review of more than 30,000 healthcare professionals across 43 different jurisdictions. And they were looking at cannabis use, medical cannabis use specifically to treat 15 different medical conditions, and found that cannabis had potential abuse risk lower than drugs in Schedule 1 and 2, and that it currently has accepted medical use for treatment. This morning, of course, the DEA confirmed that move of cannabis to Schedule 3. Now, this shift to Schedule 3 and the ability for physicians to prescribe medical cannabis requires an infrastructure to be established in South Carolina, one that makes the product available and educates doctors on how and when to utilize this medicine. So Senate Bill 423 will provide that infrastructure for a safe, tested, and secure supply. And a Schedule 3 without medical cannabis program in South Carolina would still push people to the illicit market and extend the timeline for patients to have access to this life-changing medication. So I respectfully ask that you support this important and beneficial piece of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate it. Next up is Tony Beam, I think. Is that correct? Oh,
Yes.
Of course. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you to all the members of the committee for giving me this opportunity just to speak briefly. I want to accomplish two things. I want to bring to your attention a scientific study that was just released on February the 28th of 2024 from the American Heart Association, and that involved 430,000 adults. I think the size of the study was impressive in terms of the scope of how many people were involved, how much information was gleaned. The study took place from 2016 through 2020, and I'm just going to read this brief two-paragraph synopsis, and then I want to communicate the South Carolina Baptist Convention resolution that was passed urging that we not go down the road of medical marijuana. But here's what the study said. It says the researchers specifically investigated whether cannabis use was associated with adverse cardiovascular outcomes among the general adult population, among people who had never smoked tobacco or used e-cigarettes, and among younger adults defined as men under age 55 and women under age 65 at risk for heart disease. They also factored in the number of days per month that people use cannabis. And here's the first paragraph of the analysis, which says, any cannabis use, smoked, eaten, or vaporized, was independently associated with a higher number of adverse cardiovascular outcomes, coronary heart disease, myocardial infarction, and stroke, and with more frequent use, that is, more days per month, the odds of adverse outcomes were even higher. The results were similar after controlling for other cardiovascular risk factors, including tobacco and or e-cigarette use, alcohol consumption, body mass index, type 2 diabetes, and physical activity. And I would point out just the importance of this study, as I've already mentioned, because of the scope, the size of the study, But I would also say that because that they controlled for other factors. Many of the marijuana studies that we see don't take into consideration the possibility that adverse effects could be coming from other sources, such as alcohol use or tobacco use or something other, some other substance that could be a co-contributor to the adverse effect of marijuana. This study, for the first time that I'm aware of, this size study took into account for those factors and said, even if you discount tobacco use, if you remove the idea of alcohol use, all of that, using just the data from those who are marijuana users that are not necessarily users of tobacco or alcohol in an adverse way, that this is the effect that it has a negative effect on cardiovascular system, including heart attack, stroke, and so forth. So I wanted to bring that to your attention because I thought it was significant, and the fact that it was just recently released for the public. It's a fairly new study. And now for the South Carolina Baptist Convention, I do work with the South Carolina Convention as a policy consultant. I keep Baptists informed of what's going on in the State House, and I try to be here as often as I can to get involved in legislation that the South Carolina Convention has specifically passed resolutions to comment on. That's what I try to sort of limit my involvement to. And so they did pass a resolution that has to do with medical marijuana. I'll read just the resolution part, the resolved, without all of the whereases for the sake of time. That we, the messengers of the South Carolina Baptist Convention meeting in North Charleston, are opposed to the legalization of medical and recreational marijuana, and be it further resolved that non-hallucinogenic CBD component treatments that are FDA approved, prescribed by licensed medical doctors, and dispensed by licensed pharmacies are acceptable to help severely ill patients. And be it finally resolved that decisions about access to prescribed and over-the-counter medication should be guided by medical science and ethics, not cultural or political ideology. So that was the wording of the resolution that was passed by the convention in North Charleston, and that dates back to 2018. But when we go back and look at, for example, the Christian Life and Public Affairs Committee, which represents South Carolina Baptist in the interim, this is still valid in terms of what the South Carolina Baptist Convention has passed. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Do we have any questions, Mr. Sessions?
Sure.
Thank you for your time. Thank you, Chair Lady. Do you mind giving us the information on that study? Just to staff here as far as
Sure.
title, who sponsored it, where can we find it, those types of things?
Yes, would you, in fact, I could send it to you all. I imagine, we've got the committees listed. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you. Thank you very much. We appreciate you being here this afternoon.
Thank you.
Next up, we have
Frank.
Ted Godwin. Thank you for being with us this afternoon.
Glad to be here. I'd have been here last week, but I didn't know about it. And I was only informed about this just a couple of days ago. And if I had more notice, we'd have a room full of veterans and that nature. I'm involved with the South Carolina Combat Veteran Group, which consists of Greenville, Charleston, Sumter, and Columbia. And the commander told me he was going to try to get here. We're on the situation where we saw that they were saying that medical marijuana was for the veterans. Well, yes and no, it's not. Basically, what this is designed for is for people who got seizures and stuff. The veteran groups that will be here the next time in that nature is we prefer to smoke it. Roll a joint, pack a little pipe. You get, within 10 minutes, you get results. If you're in a depressed mood, and you down in the dumps, you get the results, like I say, within 10 minutes, and it lasts 1 hour. Where if you take a gummy, it takes an hour for it to kick in, and then it lasts for hours longer than what you basically need. And the deal to do with medical marijuana, 38 states have medical marijuana. Of those 38 states, There's also 3 of the territorials involved, which is Guam, Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico, and I think the other was MSS something in that nature. And of all these states, some of them allow you to actually grow. I'm not recommending that part right now because some of the stuff they got there I disagree with. You know, one of a couple states got you can grow 12 plants. You don't need that, 2 or 3. But still, a lot of them allow 2.5 ounces that you can have in your possession. And some has gone as high as 8 ounces, you know, that you can get in a 90-day period. And of all these, this kind of put together, you don't hear people who are basically stoned or you feel stoned or violent like they are to do with what he was kind of basically saying on here. Liquor has a more effect on whatever, yet we got it legalized. You go out there and you drink, you go out there and kill your brother, you go out there and kill somebody you don't know, you go out in the car and kill somebody. That don't happen to people who smoke or do, I reckon it's the way you say weed, cannabis, and that nature. And it's not you're not quite as addictive to it as you are with alcohol, and you can function when you're more or less stoned. Also, when him mentioned the fact about the recreational, there's 2 different types of marijuana, indica and sativa. Indica is the party weed. That's the one the hippies get crazy over and carry on, and the recreational, what he was mentioning. Sativa is a different one. Sativa is used more in medicines than what indica is. And sativa puts you in a relaxed mode. You don't get violent about people. You mellow out a little bit about what's going on and what's been bothering you. It relaxes you. And for me, I've been smoking it for now ever since Vietnam. And I got to Vietnam one night. We got attacked. I was drunk. I'm like this trying to shoot back. I quit right then, and I've been dry ever since. And that nature's 54 years. Now, I got to smoking in this nature, and you get out 100 yards, and I can drop you. And there's no question about it. There's different ways it does. But sativa is the medical one that helps us veterans with our sleep, which is what I use it for mainly, is to sleep. It helps you with depression when you're getting a little bit of the depression part. And it's just, it's more preferred by them. And like I said, if we have to come to another meeting here, I promise you, I will fill this room with veterans from around the state because I've already talked to them and that nature. And I'm going to talk to some again here in 2 weeks. And the Columbia group's over 200 strong, and they will fill this room up. And that's the back what's going there. So I ask you to consider adding smoking in here. We can get that from the dispensaries and that nature. You know, like out in California right now, they've had people out there who've gotten the weed and have died from it because it's been laced with fentanyl and that nature. So you don't know what you're basically getting. So later on, it'll be discussed some other time about the growing part. But it's just that even if we get out of the dispensary, you're taking still a gamble there. But I appreciate your time, and
Thank you, Mr.
that's telling me
Godwin.
goodbye. So,
Thank you, Mr. Godwin. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you being here with us. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, ma'am.
And so we.
And as you can see, Agent Orange, I have Agent Orange rash. It don't go away. I've lost, and then when they say 59,000 of us have died in Vietnam, bull, you got to add all the ones who died from Agent Orange. When the guy was out in the field, he got out of water. He dipped down the stream, drank that water. I've lost many of my buddies to different things to do with Agent Orange.
I am so sorry. Thank you again for being here. If some of your fellow veterans want to send us an email and give us their thoughts on the subject matter, we are willing to do that, and we're able to do that. If you can look at the agenda notice that's on the State House website, there is an email address there that you can use if you'd like to send in input.
I'm not computer savvy. my wife is, and I don't know if she's.
Yeah.
She said we'll figure it out.
Representative Cox will give you a copy of that, so you can have you and your friends can email us. Thank you.
It would deeply appreciate it.
Thank you.
Y'all have a good week.
All right, you too.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Karen St. Marie. I believe she's online waiting for us. Good afternoon. Yeah. Make sure that you're unmuted if you would. So you want to go on to a different?
Hold on one second.
Oh, there we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay.
Good
I'm sorry
afternoon.
about that. I'm not familiar with this platform, so I apologize.
That's fine.
Okay, here we go. So good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. Thank you for your opportunity to share my son's story and my testimony with you. My name is Karen St. Marie, and I'm the founder and executive director of the South Carolina Advocates for Epilepsy, the only statewide nonprofit for epilepsy in our state. Most importantly, I am the mother and full-time caregiver to my 36-year-old son, Eric. On February 28, 2007, he was loving life, attending college, working part-time, owned a car, and had a thriving social life. The very next day, his life forever changed, all in the blink of an eye. Eric suffered 3 unprovoked tonic-clonic, also known as grand mal seizures, in 18 hours. The normal first line of treatment for seizures is medications, but we quickly learned that Eric would be diagnosed with refractory epilepsy, which meant medications were not working. You see, after an initial medication fails, the chances of each subsequent medication working drops drastically. At that point, Eric asked his doctors if he was a surgery candidate. Unfortunately, at the age of 20, Eric was told that not only would medications never provide complete control of his seizures, but he was also not a surgery candidate. His outlook on life became dark and grim. For many years, Eric would have over 30 tonic-clonic seizures per month, with post-ictal periods following the seizures lasting many hours or often days. There were times he would not completely recover from one before another occurred. Since that time, Eric has tried 14 different FDA-approved medications and currently takes 4. He was participated in 2 clinical trials, one a responsive stimulator, which he still has and is using, and 1 medication. He has had 7 epilepsy surgeries. To this day, he still does not have complete control. In our world, 1 seizure is 1 seizure too many. You see, epilepsy is a consumer. It takes away a person's dignity, independence, social life, friendships, right to drive, employment, then insurance, and then the ability to obtain medications, and then enjoy so many other aspects of life. March 1st of this year marks 17 years on this journey. Eric's social life is almost non-existent. He has worked through bouts of depression and deals with multiple side effects of medication, including increased drowsiness and lack of energy, often sleeping 16 to 20 hours per day, resulting in a decreased quality of life. He's had hand tremors, headaches. He's experienced agitation and even medication toxicity are just some of the examples that he's dealt with. In the epilepsy population or patient population, you will often hear that medication side effects and comorbidities are harder to deal with than the actual seizures. Injuries can heal, but the side effects continue if you continue on medications. Medical cannabis can be a form of treatment that brings a level of seizure control that Eric has never seen. It can bring back a life that Eric so desperately wants and deserves, one without many of the things I've listed. While there is no guarantee medical cannabis could bring control like all other forms of treatment, he should have the right to make the decision for himself after consulting with his doctors. Excuse me. He should have a choice, one that would not criminalize him for using medical cannabis. Yes, we are aware of an FDA-approved cannabis medication, but it is primarily designated for very rare pediatric forms of epilepsy. Refractory patients need options now. Often they feel they are a burden to their families and become so depressed and overwhelmed that they choose to end their own lives. They wake up every morning wondering if this is the day that they will have a seizure requiring emergency transportation to a hospital or succumb to SUDEP, which is sudden unexpected death in epilepsy and occurs while taking a nap or sleeping. I ask you to put yourself in their shoes. Imagine knowing that there's a treatment out there that could reduce or eliminate your seizures and medication side effects. Wouldn't you want access to that treatment? Wouldn't you want the right to make the decision to at least try it? Or wouldn't you want this for a loved one? I know others have testified against passing this bill with stories about people who use marijuana recreationally and develop bad habits or face dangers on the illicit market. There is nothing recreational about medicinal cannabis. There is nothing fun about this journey I am on with my son. And this is a treatment that could help him and others to be able to make decisions that will bring them relationships, employment, quality of life, and a future to look forward to. In closing, as a child, I was taught that during your lifetime, if you could have a positive impact on just one person's life, your compassion and effects were worth making. On behalf of Eric, all the people in South Carolina with epilepsy, and those that will be diagnosed and their families, I ask that you have a positive impact on citizens of South Carolina by swiftly giving this bill a vote and then voting yes to pass S423. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. St. Marie. Thank you for sharing the story of your son, and I certainly hope that very, very soon he can find something that will help him in whatever form that may take. So thank you for being here. I believe we do have one question, Mr. Sessions.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. And I echo the chair's position. I think we as a committee can sympathize with your family's journey with this. Not only it affects your son, but also you and that whole support structure. So heart and prayers go out to you and your family. Wanted to understand, have you explored any of the legal CBD options that are out there? And if so, could you maybe explain any benefits or maybe, the pros and cons of that?
Again, the current Epidiolex is primarily designated for pediatrics, and Eric is 36 years old, so that is not at this point one that would be prescribed for him. And Eric and ourselves as a family have chosen to wait until an appropriate form. He has not ever tried anything recreationally, so we're waiting for advice from his doctors, and hopefully, the passage of this bill will give us that opportunity to take it legally.
Okay. Can you enlighten the committee? Has any doctor ever given you that opportunity and suggested that maybe a legal CBD form could help? And I'm asking because I'm a father of an 8-year-old who has seizures. So I will, maybe, hopefully not, but I might be sitting in your seat 20 years from now. And so I'm trying to educate myself, not only just me, but also the committee.
So Eric has a team of doctors at MUSC, and that is where he's received all of his care. And one doctor has said, if this ever became legal, that Eric would be one of his very first patients that he would prescribe this for.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Tanya Shelnut. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Tanya Shelnut, and I come to you today as a mom. I come to you as a mom of 5 and as one representing the many families who have and are struggling with the issue of marijuana use in their families and are afraid to speak up about it due to shame. Shame of how people will perceive them when we share that our child is using marijuana. Shame to share that our child tells us that he hates us because we're trying to help them. For trying to help, there's a lot of shame associated with that. Shame in the family that's struggling with the addiction. You see, that's our story. One day my son was outside with some friends. He came inside and he smelled heavily of marijuana. And I said, "Son, are you smoking marijuana?" And he denied it. And we began drug testing him and going through the process of trying to help him. They would hide the drug test by getting clean urine to pass their drug test. They then would go on to smoke a vape THC and have the test come up positive. And we tried so many different things. And growing up, it's important to know that our son was very happy, very go along to get along child, and very, one of 5, and was an excellent student and an excellent athlete. And when he started down this path, my son went into one of the darkest places I have ever seen as a mom. He was depressed. He wanted to commit suicide. He didn't want to live. And so when I stand up here to tell you today, it was devastating to worry about whether or not my son was going to take his own life. We even lost 2 kids in our community to fentanyl-laced marijuana, and that wasn't enough for my son and his friend group to stop. You're going to hear many today to talk about how this is just medical marijuana, and I sympathize with that. I had a daughter who had epilepsy from the time she was 13 months until she was 9, with thousands of seizures every day, and it's very scary. But what is more scary is that we're taking our children down a path and allowing them to have more access to marijuana than they should. We see what happens, the devastating effects in studies that happen to their brains. And we should not be taking action that it's going to make it easier for our kids. I'm asking you to protect our children. Please don't take South Carolina down this dangerous road that leads to further mental health issues for our children. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for being here with us this afternoon, and thank you for being brave and telling your story. All of these stories are important, and all of them take a certain amount of bravery to say in the public what's on your mind and what's on your heart. So we appreciate that. Do we have any questions? No questions? All right. Next up, we have Gary Hess. Good afternoon. Sorry if I caught you off guard there.
No, you did. You did with the 3-minute timeline. I came, traveled here from New Orleans, Louisiana, and my prepared testimony was just shy of 20 minutes. So.
Well, please feel free to submit that to the committee, and we will make sure that it gets distributed and that everyone has a chance to read your full testimony. Thank you.
I sure will. In last week's testimony, Chief Keeld called me out in his testimony, so I just thought it was necessary to come here and respond in person. My name is Gary Hess. I'm 46 years old, the founder and executive director of the Veterans Alliance for Holistic Alternatives. I have an undergraduate degree in sociology. I competed in 4 years of NCAA collegiate baseball. I served in the Marine Corps from 98 to 2008, both enlisted and as an officer. My grandfather was a distinguished World War II veteran, and my father spent his professional career in the oil and gas industry. I grew up during a time where America declared war on drugs and a just say no culture. There was zero tolerance in every aspect. Marijuana was demonized. After service, I served as a chief operating officer for a multi-million-dollar heavy and construction general contracting firm, as well as an oil and gas firm. I'm not supposed to be the one here talking to you today about cannabis. In the Marine Corps, I served as an infantry officer. I was a mobile assault platoon commander. I was a scout sniper employment officer. I finished up at the Special Operations Training Group. In short, I was going to share a number of experiences with you that are men and women experienced in combat. The turning point for me was in December, the day after Christmas in 2006. There was a full-size Traxel dump truck loaded with C4 that ran into the house we were occupying and detonated. It led to an immense amount of pain. I lost a good friend and a brother and experienced deep moral injuries where we lose the basic goodness that we are inherently born with, and everything starts to take on a negative connotation until the point that we lose hope and result in a period of hopelessness. As I listened to Chief Keel testimony last week, he mentioned in his testimony, so I thought it warranted to have this conversation in person. It reminded me of the voice of my own father and grandfather, two men that I have incredible respect and admiration for. Two men who were also influenced by the war on drugs and the negative stigmas that created it. The truth is that this conversation about medical cannabis has changed because of the information and access that is now available to those in need. As I came home, I experienced high levels of anxiety, depression, gut disorders, sleep disorders, you name it, chronic pain, compulsive thoughts, hyperarousal, alterations in cognitive behavior and mood. I turned my hands over to the Western model of medicine, and for almost a decade, I was prescribed a plethora of pharmaceuticals, and at the end of that decade, the best answer was putting a pistol in my mouth and pulling a trigger. To this day, I don't know why I stand here or how I'm even here today. In short, I gained access to medical-grade cannabis that was tracked from seed to sale with the chain of custody and testing results that allowed me access to a product where I knew exactly what was in it. I could start low and go slow until I found the dose and the product that was correct for me. It absolutely changed my life. Chief Keel argued that there's not enough research. This is not a true statement. In fact, there are over 38,000 peer-reviewed articles on medical cannabis that is available. And the truth is, depending on which side you sit on this fence, you can find the information that supports and justifies your argument. He argued that it's not FDA approved. The reasons that there are barriers to research. Up until today, it was a Schedule I narcotic. It was not realized for any medical value. That has changed today. What a coincidence. Up until 3 years ago, there was only one approved supplier of cannabis for clinical research, the National Institute of Drug Abuse, which was founded to study the negative effects of cannabis. I have a question. How many states have legalized because of FDA approval? And out of curiosity, why did they legalize? My assumption and what I've been seeing is an overwhelming demand from the public because their medical needs are not being met, as you've heard many times today already. And the only access they have is the unregulated black market. And when that happens, you hear stories of those that just came before me, of not knowing what's in the product and having a negative side effects. It's not regulated, it's not controlled, it's not dispensed by a pharmacist and recommended by a doctor. And there's no control over that program. Another question for you. Do you know what other drugs are FDA approved? Opioids, Adderall, Ambien, Wellbutrin, Prozac, all that I have personally experienced, all with side effects, addictive properties, and withdrawal symptoms far worse and not even comparable to cannabis. You expressed your concerns over safety. Unlike opioids and the other pharmaceuticals, it is impossible to overdose. It has no effect on a breathing modulation. There's a system in a chart, it's called the LD50, a lethal dose for 50% of 50% of those who consume at a certain dosage will die. Cannabis is not on that list. It is impossible to overdose, unlike Tylenol, ibuprofen, and aspirin, which are on that list. In regards to dosing, because of its safety profile, under the guidance of a physician, they can start low and go slow until they find the right dose for them, without the dangerous side effects that we see and experience with pharmaceuticals.
It's called the LD50, a lethal dose for 50% of 50% of those who consume at a certain dosage will die. Cannabis is not on that list.
You need to mute there.
Is that me?
Ask Dr. Jackson to mute.
Dr. Jackson needs to mute his.
Dr. Jackson.
Please mute
The State House stream.
the stage. You need to mute the State House stream.
Do I keep going?
Would you mute the State House stream, please? Okay. All right, I think we're good.
Chief Keel mentioned that he was skeptical of medical claims. This is not just about the veteran community and suicide. Those who are affected with autoimmune disorders, migraines, fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome, cancer, epilepsy, autism, arthritis, chronic pain, substance abuse disorders have all received benefits from the use of medical cannabis. I want to share a story. This is a gentleman named Joe Robnack. He's retired Marine Corps, first sergeant, senior enlisted in my company that I served with over 15 years ago. He spent another 10 years in a Defense Intelligence Agency. 2 years ago, I sat with him to guide his first medical cannabis experience. That's 12 pills that he's taking on a daily basis, 12 different pharmaceuticals to treat the same struggle that I was dealing with. I spoke with him today asking him for permission to share his story. He's on 2 pharmaceuticals right now to regulate his blood pressure, which is hereditary. On my board of directors since the Assistant Secretary of Defense that retired in 2018 over Middle East operations, along with the SEAL Team 6 commander. If you look at our social media channels, you'll see a response from his mother, Miss Dawn Ulrich. I'm not a veteran, but Vaha gave me resolution to a decade-old autoimmune disorder. I'm almost pain-free. The truth is, with the correct guidance, the medical efficacy of this plant cannot be denied, and the benefits that patients are gaining cannot be denied either.
Mr. Hess, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We are going to have to wrap it up so we can keep moving along. If you don't mind just finishing out, we'd appreciate it.
The last one, here's what Chief Keel called me out on. Well, I'm going to make 2 more points. Everyone's here concerned about the black market and access. Black market's already here. It's getting shipped in from other states, or it's right in front of your eyes. I can walk 2 blocks from here to the nearest smoke shop and get a high THC concentrate in the form of Delta 8, Delta 10, you name it. It's already here. This is what they have access to. There's no regulation, there's no testing, there's no quality control. Dr. Keel called out and a reporter in an article that was run in South Carolina 2 years ago, where I said that more than 22 veterans a day are taking their lives and that within a year's time, approximately 9,000 veterans would be lost to suicide. He stated that that was not true. I will give him credit. That was not true. If you look at an article released by the Military Times after my testimony, veteran suicide rates may be double the federal estimate study suggests. Oh, by the way, we were not including pharmaceutical overdoses in those suicide numbers. The truth is that since the inception of combat, we have lost just over 7,000 service members. In that same period of time, since 2001, we have lost over 200,000 veterans to suicide and pharmaceutical overdoses. You heard from another veteran, and I guarantee you he can fill this room. This is what I do on a daily basis. I studied this. I locked myself in a garage. I sold everything that I owned, the little that I had left, because I had to have a conversation with my own father and my grandfather about how this was helping me. And the post-traumatic growth that was experienced from the intentional use of cannabis with the right intentions and structured use allowed me to grow and achieve a life that I never thought possible. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here this afternoon. There again, if you've got additional information you want to send our way, we can get connected with you so that you can do that. Thank you for your service. It's a tough road, I know. So just know that this committee here supports our veterans, and we're behind you. And so if there are any other things that we can help you with, just let us know. To the group we have here, let's try to eliminate the clapping and all of that kind of stuff, because number one, it'll take us a little bit longer, and we're going to be running short on time. But we just don't want to, I think, start that and have one group getting cheers and one group not. So anyway, thank you. Appreciate it. Next up, Dr. Elias Jackson, I believe. Online.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Can, great. I want to thank Madam Chairman and the committee for allowing me to speak today. My name is Dr. Elias Jackson. I'm Vice President of Vera Farm Enterprises. Vera Farm owns the 4 foundational patents for the evaluation, testing, verification, and certification of cannabinoids and cannabinoid-based products for human consumption. I've studied cannabinoids at MD Anderson Cancer Center, where I was able to kill resistant forms of cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, targeting CB1 receptors. And I'm here today testifying against the current bill. As the bill is written, it's similar to many of the other states. And I want to bring up several points. One, I hear a lot of people talking against law enforcement. Law enforcement is a critical piece to any standardized regulatory framework for any state. What we're seeing in the states that do have these quote unquote medical marijuana programs, we're seeing increased crime, increased trafficking. We're putting the officers at risk, not being able to really discern, especially if it's flower, whether or not it's a legal or a allowed product to be shipped into the state. That's one. Two, when we talk about medical and recreational, being a former cancer drug developer with Alex Oncology, also I studied at Yale University, was faculty member there, I was taught medical school. By calling these programs medical, we're borderline unethical, to be honest with you. We have examples of true medical programs when we look at the pharmaceutical industry. And for an example, I like to say if I bought Tylenol in Houston and then bought it in Colombia, we know it's the same because the checks and balances are there to ensure the safety of the users. In the case of this cannabis market, everyone is saying medical, but we don't have the medical checks and balances. I commend Dr. Lynch for his testimony because we don't really hear a lot of that as far as the effects of these programs in these states. Now, let me say this. I have nothing but sympathy for the patients, the users in my own family, which we have members of my family with severe PTSD. Cannabis has helped them. I've worked being a former 91 Bravo U.S. Army Reserves. I've seen firsthand the positive effects of use of cannabinoids. But when we open the door with a program that we don't instill the checks and balances, we end up hurting the state and the members of the state moving forward. If you look on the chat, I just put up 3 articles that identify the problems, just a little of the problems. When you look at New York State, New York State has 80 legal dispensaries and over 2,000 illegal dispensaries. Now, that would not function in a true medical program. You know, you don't have a legal dispensary for Tylenol or any other approved medication. 2, one of the well-kept secrets in this industry is lab shopping. So a lot of the laboratories that test these cannabinoid products claim that, okay, we're ISO certified. Well, you can purchase ISO certification. That doesn't mean I'm running my HPLC the same way you're running your HPLC. So what we currently have in the industry is if I go to lab A and they don't give me the results I want to pass the requirements of the state, all I have to do is go to lab B. Maybe I pay a little extra, but I'm going to get the numbers that I need to pass the requirements of the state. And then finally, I put up a link to the FDA warning letters to these companies that are currently producing these cannabinoid products. When you go to the gas station and you see all of these different products, and I know everybody want to say Delta 8, Delta 9, but from our meetings with the FDA and the scientific board, we found there are close to 200 to 300 chemicals that they're putting in these products. And here's the thing, there's no checks and balances to really identify what they are, and some of them we don't even have the names. And an example is that you can go back to like bath salts. If there's no legal checks and balances for it, then you'll never know what exactly the people are getting. I want to be clear that being a former cancer drug developer, medical school professor, research scientist, I see the potential efficacy of cannabinoid-based products. But this bill, as it's written, it is no different than some of these other states, and you are going to have similar issues. This is not a us against them. Law enforcement, the pharmacies, the physicians, we can all work together and make this right. With a couple of updates to the bill, I think we can really put something together that would make South Carolina the gold standard that the nation would follow and every other state would follow. And let me just end with my own personal story. My son was diagnosed in the spectrum of autism. And for any parent, especially my family farmers, so to hear that your son won't become a productive member of society can be heartbreaking. And while I was at Yale, his school district gave us a list of opioids that they would allow students to take if they had some neurological condition. Well, I decided not to put him on those drugs, and I began to look for alternative teaching methods and pharmacological methods, which caused me to look at the cannabinoid area. And at the time, the research was anecdotal. Fast forward to today, there's a lot of research out there, and you're going to hear scientists get up here, just like me, and say, I've done over 40 papers on cannabinoids, and I was able to do this and that. Yeah, in the static setting of a laboratory, yeah, that's fine. But when you start looking at the bioavailability data points that are necessary to bring a drug to market, it's a completely different situation. You have to understand how this reacts with other elements in the body. Maybe that patient is on other medication. How does the physician be able to quickly evaluate the effectiveness of said cannabinoid product? There are a lot of things that would make this truly medical, and we're not there. So just want to end to say my son today is in his last year at junior college, getting his degree in engineering design because he wants to design buildings. So I want to thank the committee. I think that as the bill as it stands now should not pass. If we make a couple of changes to really make this a medical platform, then I think South Carolina could be the gold standard in doing this correctly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. I appreciate your time this afternoon. I'm glad to hear that your son's doing better. We can, of the documents that you've posted, I believe we can have access to those, is that correct? Okay. We can have access to those documents and make sure that everyone on the committee has a copy of that information. Does anybody have any questions? Nope. All right. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Dr. Pettit is up next. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Steve Pettit. I am the new president of Palmetto Family Council here in the state of South Carolina. And so I'd like to speak from our perspective. I want to say, first of all, that we pray for our legislators because we know that you are leaders and you're guides, and biblically, you're actually shepherds. And the decisions that you make will make all the difference in our state. I also want you to know that we represent the families of the state of South Carolina in many ways, and biblical values, and what we understand will bring peace, and actually the biblical word shalom, or welfare, to a community, which we all desire. I do, as a Citadel graduate, I deeply respect our servicemen who have served and suffered for their service, and then those who are suffering from physical difficulties. My wife has had multiple sclerosis, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma cancer, Waldenstrom's macroglobulinemia cancer, and she currently has squamous cell carcinoma cancer. And so she suffers every single day, and so I feel the compassion for those who spoke today. I would like to say, however, that we would be very opposed to the approach of medical marijuana. We know already that it is not approved by the FDA. There's not a pathway forward to make it in this approach that would be, as already mentioned by the former speaker, an approach that we think is a wise approach. What is best, what is wise, what is healthy, what is good. We know that from a biblical perspective that being involved in hallucinogenic drugs is a sinful behavior, because even drunkenness is considered sinful behavior. Proverbs 14:34 says, righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. That word exalt means to lift it up, to be a place of influence, and to be a place that actually people want to follow. And we know that our country has been that for many years, but we also know that sin brings decline. We would be desperately concerned for our families, because we know that the pathway to recreational marijuana is through medical marijuana, as it is in our country. And we would be concerned as leaders that this would be a stumbling block. And we want South Carolina to be a healthy, shalom, peaceful community, and we think that this would bring a spiritual and moral decline to our state from which we don't think we could ever recover. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions? No, sir, thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy Roberson, please. Next. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for listening to me. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes, we can.
Okay, my name is Kathy Robertson, and I'm from Charleston, South Carolina. In 2015, I came to my first meeting here in Columbia. It was pouring down rain. I came all by myself. Didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I had to do something. In 2016, or since then, Morgan and I have come to every meeting that we could be here for, fighting for the legalization of medical cannabis in South Carolina. In 2016, Tom Davis told Morgan's story on the Senate floor. In 2014, Morgan has intractable epilepsy, like Miss St. Marie's son. There's over 40 types of seizures, and he's had them all. In 2014, he took 66 prescriptions. He was 9 years old. Some of them said 6 per day, some of them said 2 per day, some of them said 2 every 4 hours. All of these were FDA-approved prescriptions. The side effects of these FDA medications were killing him. Some even caused seizures. He was a little kid who had so many different side effects that we named them. He could not tell you what number came after 7. He could hardly wash his hands, and he was losing the ability to walk. It took 3 years and a lot of prayer. I'm a Baptist, to get off these epilepsy drugs. With the help of cannabis, we were able to eliminate all of the medications and find freedom from seizures, completely improving his quality of life. In June, he will be pharmaceutical free for 7 years, and in July, we will celebrate 7 years without seizures. We are here today to beg for the next child, the next veteran, the next parent, the next addict, and the next patient. Please allow South Carolina patients and their doctors the freedom to treat their illnesses with a plant instead of chemicals. I am sure that I have saved South Carolina Medicaid a ton of money, but more importantly, I saved this child's life. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for sharing that story with us. Does anyone have any questions? I don't think so. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Dr. Myers, I believe, online. Is that correct? Yes. Dr. Myers.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, committee members, appreciate it. My name is Curry Myers. I'm a retired sheriff of Johnson County, Kansas, which is located in the Kansas City metropolitan area. Prior to being sheriff, I was a special agent and state trooper. I'm a criminal justice public policy consultant for Americans for Prosperity and a criminology professor. I'm supportive of medical cannabis legislation, but it has to be with constraints and regulatory oversight. I'd like to address some concerns that I have as a former law enforcement officer and someone who understands the cannabis industry very well. So here's some recommendations. I think first is, this is a medical marijuana bill, so conflating medical marijuana with recreational marijuana or outright decriminalization is an important notation when understanding this legislation. I am not a supporter of either recreational cannabis or decriminalization of drugs, and I believe if one is to be successful in the implementation of this law, there needs to be limitations and regulatory requirements associated with this law, and there needs to be sanctions to hold people and license holders accountable. I recommend that enforcement of illicit cannabis be funded and a priority for law enforcement so they continue with their enforcement efforts. I have high regards for South Carolina law enforcement, especially the elected sheriffs. You have a great SLED department and your state troopers. So focused deterrence can and should live hand in hand with legal cannabis programs, and always remember the economic laws of elasticity, traditionally applied to analysis of consumer behavior and markets. But in the drug world, you have to understand the supply to changes in price and availability and other factors. For instance, if the punishment for a crime is severe and swiftly enforced, the elasticity of committing the crime decreases, leading to a decrease in its overall occurrence. As an example, if you look at the drug market, specifically cannabis, demand may increase if you have things like decriminalization, which we don't have, so it's going to compete with the legal market, and we don't want to have the illicit market competing with a market that is here to help people who need it as a medicine. We also need to have limitations on THC levels. There's no doubt that when it goes to recreational, we see high levels of THC that can result in cannabis psychosis. There needs to be best practices for security and compliance, and these regulations need to have some teeth in the enforcement mechanisms so they can be taken seriously. Compliance audits and inspections of medical cannabis facilities by the state should be completed in a timely manner, as well as self-inspections from independent qualified companies that report directly back to the state, I think would be important. And these annual inspections need to be done on time or even moved to semi-annual. I highly suggest a seed to sale tracking system that can be used to follow the production process from seed to harvest to selling. And there should be standards on secure transportation of marijuana and marijuana-infused products, as well as standards in security, safety, waste management, and all approved at the local level, of course, to facilitate and operate a dispensary or facility. If you consider these regulations and enforcement options for the bill, I can assure you that an enforcement agency in charge of the industry has true cause and effect enforcement capabilities in addition, then you should be able to have a successful medical cannabis program in the long term. I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak before you today.
Thank you. That's all good information. We appreciate your thoughts and your time this afternoon. Do we have any questions for Mr. Myers? No? Okay, thank you. We appreciate it.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Next, we have Kimberly, and I believe it's Belk. Good afternoon. Thank you for being with us.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Kimberly Belk, and I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. In support of the Cannabis Care Act, Compassionate Care Act, S423, I'm a 67-year-old retired registered nurse and disabled Vietnam-era veteran who sustained a back injury while I was on active duty. I continue to suffer multiple spasms and pain despite a plethora of muscle relaxants and antispasmodic medications. I also suffer from PTSD due to a separate incident while on active duty. Medical documentation of these facts is available if you want to check them. In October of 2018, I had an injury that shattered my left wrist. When I went to the hospital, the orthopedic surgeon on duty gave me appropriately used narcotic analgesics in an appropriate adult dose. These medications caused me to have respiratory distress, and I had to be given Narcan to restore my ability to breathe. The doctor was trying to set my arm with a closed reduction, and it was just too severe. And the medications they gave me literally made me almost stop breathing. We've heard people talk here about what's being done in other states and addiction. One thing that nobody mentioned is the addictive personality. You can become addicted to anything. Foodaholics, sexaholics, alcoholaholics. If you have the tendency for that personality trait, then you're going to get addicted to something. It's not that marijuana is inherently addictive, but if you suffer from that personality trait, you'll become addicted to something at some point in time in your life. Back to my broken arm. A National Institute of Health study has shown that people with red hair have a high pain tolerance and a low tolerance to narcotics, which I proved by stopping breathing when they were given to me. At one point in my career as a registered nurse, I was a certified case manager working home health and hospice. I have witnessed personally many tragic, torturous deaths and living with your disease when narcotics and analgesics no longer treated your symptoms. And I've seen them suffer. I've also seen families suffer watching their loved one die a torturous death because conventional medications are no longer effective for those people. My own family went through this when our mother died of cancer in 1989. I have heard pros and cons of both sides, but again, we're talking about what's going on in South Carolina. It doesn't matter what they're doing in New York. We're here. I want to thank the committee for allowing me to speak the power to end suffering of many South Carolinians is in your hands. And I pray that you make a decision swiftly so that it hits the floor before adjournment on May 9th. Thank you.
You have a question?
Yeah, Mr. Pace, do you have a question? Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your testimony. So in your experience, particularly in the hospice environment, is something like what we're talking about here, do you think that, how effective would it be compared to your experience with like opioids and the end-of-life care?
Medical marijuana does not have the overwhelming sedative qualities that many of the drugs cancer patients take. And I'm speaking about Dilaudid, morphine, those classifications of drugs. Using that classification of drugs takes away the patient's ability to think and speak clearly and to respond appropriately. It also lowers yourself down physically, that you don't want to eat much, you don't want to drink much, and your family's standing right there watching you waste away and die. And there are many other reasons for medical marijuana than just epilepsy, cachexia. I can tell you many stories, but obviously the best story is that we need to take care of South Carolinians, and you all have the power to do that by passing this bill. Any more questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Belk. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Dr. Kovacs. Thank you for your patience. We appreciate that.
Oh, no problem. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, please.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you for the committee for letting me give testimony today. I was not able to log on last week, so I'm happy to be here today. My name is Dr. Jennifer Kovacs. I've been a clinical pharmacist for over 22 years. I'm licensed in South Carolina, Florida, and Arizona. My background encompasses all aspects of retail, management, outpatient hospital, 340B clinics, long-term care, assisted living, skilled nursing facilities, hospice, federally qualified healthcare centers, free clinics, and methadone treatment centers. I also give legal expert witness testimony on malpractice cases. First of all, I guess I'd like to remind everyone that cannabis is the most studied substance on the planet. I kept hearing last week that, well, we don't have enough literature, there's not enough data, there's not enough studies, it's not being done. It has been done. It is being done. More is coming. It's done worldwide. Whether the United States chooses to accept what's done in other countries that have legalized is another issue. But if you research the literature, those studies are out there. Testimonies are being given on the history and background and how it became the third most prescribed medicine at the turn of the century, the most stigmatized substance since 1937, dropped from the U.S. Pharmacopoeia in 1942. We know the political, racial, and financial motivations that led to the criminalization of cannabis. And all this information has been brought to light, and we know what transpired. So now we can do better. It's 2024. If the data collected from 40 other states that have legalized a program in one way or another, and obviously they all started medical, some of them have gone adult use, none of those states have clawed back their programs. All the issues that we hear, the worries, and as a healthcare professional, they're my worries too. We don't want to increase DUI. We don't want it getting in the hands of teens. We don't want it to be a detriment to public health in any way, shape, or form. If cannabis wasn't a harm reduction tool, I wouldn't be here. I have a mother who has SLE lupus. She was a late life diagnosis. It took her nursing career from her. She was an RN. She did med-surg in the 70s where the whole floor was your floor and you did everything. So, you know, the past 20 years, you know, and SLE lupus is a very, if anyone's familiar, it's a very nasty way to go. I don't think any other healthcare professionals would be offering to put their reputations on the line or put their name out there unless it was on behalf of the patients. Cannabis isn't a perfect medication, uh, but it certainly has a better safety profile than most pharmaceuticals dispensed, including opiates and benzos. Cannabis has multi-target therapy. Pharmaceuticals do not. They are, one target, one chemical, one purpose. So that is why cannabis has pleiotropic effects and is able to treat numerous disease states. You can't patent a plant. Big Pharma is not very happy. People are coming off their medications and treating 3 or 4 problems at a time. That factors into, a financial issue. So that being said, cannabis is also safer than a number of things: alcohol, caffeine, Tylenol, nutmeg. Cows kill more people annually than cannabis does. Water intoxication, peanuts, 9 poisonous houseplants. And of course, the opiate epidemic that we have, fentanyl being laced in everything. And I actually read the DHEC report that was updated from, I think it was March the 15th of 2023, drug overdose deaths in South Carolina. The 2,168 drug overdose deaths, none were cannabis related. Cannabis was not mentioned in that report. So S423 is regulation this state desperately needs in place. Pharmacists, law enforcement, doctors, we all work in environments that have regulation and standardization for practice. The lack of regulation in this state is creating difficulties between cannabis industry professionals, patients, and law enforcement. I've heard over the years the proponents of the bill begging law enforcement, sit down with us, help us. How do you want this written? What can we do? Sit beside us at the table, not across from us, so the bill can be more comprehensive. And and again, we're hearing the same concerns: increased DUI, increased crime, increased teenage use, not enough studies. The data for the past 10 years or more of legalization in this country doesn't support those theories anymore. Almost all the states have a zero tolerance or proof of impairment for cannabis for DUID. There are saliva tests available. Those tests will show cannabis use within 3 days. There are DRE officers that are used in those states that use that technology in the field, and then they can go to the blood test, which will, check for the impairment within the past 12 to 24 hours. I have personally tried out those cannabis goggles that they have at events and try to drive a golf cart just to test what an impairment driving, with, and it was it was here in Greenville, just to see what that looked like. So they even have these goggles that you can test out to see, well, what is the impairment? Federally, we have a reschedule and deschedule program, banking issues, expungement, social equity. All these things are being discussed, but the strictest medical bill in the country, ours, keeps stalling out. We have access to guns, alcohol, gambling, and hunting. It's all regulated. Are there bad outcomes in South Carolina with the aforementioned? Yes. Are they still legal? Yes. I implore the committee that you pass this bill so the real work can get started. No, this bill is not perfect. Even if it mimics other states, you have to start somewhere. I don't know if any bill that's written the first time is perfect and not amended or fixed. I don't think anything's in the final stages the first time you write it or even after it's passed. South Carolina needs the structure. If we don't put the structure in place, it's just going to continue to run amok. We have the smoke shops and the gas stations selling products. They're not selling the best and safest products, but they are available to anyone. Anyone can buy synthetic cannabinoids and kratom, which are more harmful than medical cannabis, in my opinion. And we keep crossing the streams between adult use and medical use. And we have to start thinking about caps on THC, and we're not talking about 30% THC items. That's not a medical program. So in closing, I just don't think that South Carolina can afford the continual watchful waiting in the interest of public health. The bill is putting vetted professionals in place to assist these patients with education and use, and it is not catering to a recreational mentality. Cannabis is medicine. It's recognized worldwide and in 40 states. And I really hope that the supporters can help the committee see this through.
Thank you, Dr. Kovacs. We appreciate your testimony. Does anyone have any questions? No, ma'am. Thank you. Appreciate your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Zach Sarens, I believe. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are y'all? Thank you to the committee for holding this hearing. Happy to see the spirited discussion and turnout here today. I'm thankful to everyone who spoke. My name is Zach Sarens. I'm a South Carolina native, lifelong Charlestonian, and I'm here today as an advocate for medical freedom in the Palmetto State. I speak to the committee today to implore you to advance the South Carolina Compassionate Care Act through the House and to Governor McMaster's desk for signing as soon as possible. This time-sensitive piece of legislation has just become even more prudent as roughly 90 minutes ago, the DEA has rescheduled cannabis from a Schedule I substance to a Schedule III substance. I'll say that again. The Drug Enforcement Administration today has rescheduled cannabis from a Schedule I substance with no accepted medical use to a Schedule III substance. Part of this recommendation is based on cannabis' low potential for abuse, negligible social harm, but a key criteria for the DEA on all substances is that currently accepted medical use. So the DEA, in revising their scheduling recommendation, took a look at that, and they saw that there are 30,000 healthcare providers in the United States today prescribing medical cannabis to 6 million Americans. These patients and doctors come from ideologically and politically varied jurisdictions across the country. In some cases, they've been operating for well over a decade. This includes active monitoring of both medical use and product safety and quality. Echoing what the good Dr. Kovacs said, not one single state that has ever instituted a medical cannabis program has gone back on that decision. Not one. The HHS recommendation to the DEA found that cannabis has currently accepted medical use for anorexia when related to a medical condition, nausea, vomiting, and pain. All 4 of those conditions will be covered under the South Carolina Compassionate Care Act. In my opinion, South Carolinians deserve the same medical freedoms as the 74% of Americans who live in a state with some form of medical cannabis. Unfortunately, and somewhat familiarly, South Carolina now has to play catch-up. We desperately need to institute medical cannabis infrastructure in our state, and the sooner we get to work on that, the better. If we don't pass this legislation, South Carolinians could, through no fault of their own, be denied their constitutionally protected medical freedoms. State agencies, including law enforcement, are going to have to spend their finite resources on managing state versus federal legal discrepancies if we do not act. In closing, I'd like to urge all of our representatives to engage with this issue in good faith and with an open mind. Cannabis has officially been rescheduled in the United States. Now is the time for South Carolina to protect our citizens and pass this bill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Do we have? No. I don't think we have any
Awesome.
questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Stand by. Okay, online next we have up Orlando Pagan. Orlando, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
There we go. We can see you and I believe hear you.
Okay, great.
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead, please. Thank you.
All right. Hi, good afternoon, distinguished members of the committee. My name is Orlando Pagan, I am a resident of Charleston. I can, yeah, I mean, can,
We can hear you.
okay, I keep hearing like, I don't know, something in the background.
If you would, if you have the State House stream up, you might want to mute that.
Oh, okay. That's what it was. All right,
Okay,
I
great.
apologize.
Great, sure. Thank you.
Yeah, so like I was saying, my name is Romeo Pagan. I'm a resident here in Charleston. I'm a husband, a father of two amazing kids. I'm a professional chef here in Charleston. Although I've worked as a chef for over 25 years, I've been awarded best chef in Charleston by Eater Carolinas. I have multiple Michelin stars. I was named James Beard semifinalist a few years ago, and now I notice myself slowing down from persistent fatigue and muscle pain due to living with multiple sclerosis. In 2011, while living in San Francisco, California, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. My doctors, they put me through 3 different medical treatments before finally finding the one that reduced my MS symptoms the most. Those who suffer from MS deal with several symptoms that make our day-to-day life more difficult, including muscle spasm, pain, arm and leg numbness, exhaustion, brain fog, imbalance, insomnia, and many other symptoms. In 2015, while living still in San Francisco, I decided to try medicinal marijuana just to see if it will help my symptoms, specifically my muscle pain, restless leg syndrome, and insomnia. On my first visit to the dispensary, I was very impressed how clean it was and knowledgeable the staff was there. And right away, I noticed positive results. I started to have better sleep, less pain, and less restless legs. With more sleep, my body felt better, stronger, and this improved my daily routine and improved my work days. For the first time, I began to feel hopeful about living with a chronic illness that we all know has no cure. For this reason, I'm pro the Compassionate Act, and I ask you, the committee, please act in favor of the S423 as soon as possible, so people like me that live with MS can live free from pain and be better, productive members in our communities. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to share my story with you, and I appreciate your valuable time. At this point, if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Orlando, thank you so much for your testimony this afternoon, and congratulations on your success in Charleston.
Thank you.
I would love to come and test out some of your goods, as I'm sure lots of others would too. But congratulations on that. Do we have any questions for Orlando? Yes, Mr. Sessions, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Orlando. Just off the subject, what restaurant do you chef at?
I run 2 venues. One is called Wild Common. It's a tasting menu restaurant, and the other one is Cannon Green. We do a lot of events, a lot of weddings and things like that.
Okay, thank you. I'm visiting this weekend is why I ask.
So thank you for your testimony and for that additional information. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, next up we have Jeremy Grove, I believe. Good afternoon.
All right. So my name is Jeremy Grove. I am a resident of South Carolina, like right on the Awanda, Mount Pleasant line, so Charleston basically. I served 46 months of a 60-month sentence for marijuana trafficking federally. I started my time at Edgefield Prison April 2nd of 2020. I was incarcerated in the SHU, in the Special Housing Unit, and I was stuck there for 11 months during COVID. So I spent my entire time in COVID in a 6x9 cell. I came out with a 600-page novel handwritten with a security pen held together by paper and deodorant sticks. I say that to say I believe in cannabis. I'm a member of Last Prisoner Project. I don't believe anybody should be in prison for a plant. I come here from the criminal justice and also the giving back to the communities impacted by the war on drugs. It is pathetic in America that we're all a bunch of white people in here talking about shit that we've sent black people to prison for years, to be honest with you. And that's just the truth of the situation. Luckily, because of Last Prisoner Project, they put me on a letter writing program and they gave my story to random people all across the country. Part of my story is that my belief in cannabis comes from my belief that it is a safe alternative to opiates because of my own personal experience. I also was suicidal in college. I was a college baseball player. I was at my wit's end, and my friends who I won a national Bible quiz growing up. I was very much like a good kid, you would say. And my friends, they could see how I was, and they were like, look, man, like, you might call the cops on us, but you should probably try cannabis because you're in a bad place right now. And it changed my life forever. It changed my life for the better until I got arrested for a relatively small amount, and I needed to take drug classes. And so people were like, hey, you know, you can't smoke weed. You're going to test dirty. Why don't you try, like, taking a perk on a weekend or something like that? I'm 21 years old. I didn't understand opiates. I didn't understand their dangers. All I thought was if this gets prescribed, it can't be as bad. And that is wrong. The next thing I know, I was doing 3 Oxycontin 80s a day, and I was a complete addict. I was a drug addict, and I got clean. Was completely clean and sober for 18 months, all of that. But really what it comes down to is I believe that cannabis is the safer alternative to opiates when it comes to pain management, when it comes to addiction and all of those things. And that's really what I fight for. So in my bio, they put that was my belief. And so I just like to share with you, these are other people, random strangers, who while I was in the SHU in federal prison, wrote me on pieces of paper, took the time out of their lives to tell me that I'm saddened to see yet another person who understands the world of possibilities cannabis can offer medicine. I see it every day, real people with real suffering who find a miracle relief in cannabis. THC and CBD have given me my life back from migraines, horrible, debilitating migraines. I wish I could make people understand all the lost potential of not funding cannabis research facilities. Another one, I think the opiate crisis is immense, and the government treating weed like opiates is going to do nothing but prevent people from getting their medicine, rather than the idea of weed as an addictive, damaging. It needs to be viewed as a cure to opiates. I say all that to say that we've been here, and what I see is a whole lot of agendas. I see a lab coat cartel getting paid for by the law enforcement community to come from New Jersey to talk about whatever he's talking about. He's not even from South Carolina. He obviously never read the bill. He's talking about adult use. They didn't even prep him in what he's doing up here. We care about this stuff, okay? We're from South Carolina. We give a shit, okay? I give a shit, and I'm gonna make this change. And we are going to eventually, when this bill gets right, I mean, we're talking about cancer, multiple sclerosis, neurological disease. We're really gonna sit here and say, no, we're gonna vote against that. We don't wanna help people with those diseases. That's crazy. That's morally reprehensible. It is to vote against something that helps people like that when you're saying that you know more than their doctor and them about what is best for their health. That's crazy. That's insane. And this is insanity. It's insanity that 90% of people think medical cannabis should be legal, and we're even having this conversation. This is a must. The fact that the DEA put this at a Schedule 3, honestly, this should have been passed a long time ago, because now we're behind. The state of South Carolina is behind when it comes to the medical cannabis world from here on out, and we got to get in gear or we're going to be in behind. And that's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your testimony.
Of course. If you want a copy of my novel, let me know.
Okay, we will. David Mangione, is that how you pronounce that?
Mangone.
Okay. I was putting an Italian twist on it.
No, that's all right. It's not the first time.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. Go ahead when you're ready.
Good afternoon to you all, and appreciate the opportunity to testify before the committee. I began my legal career in South Carolina and have subsequently moved to DC, where for about 8 of the last 10 years, I've focused on federal cannabis policy. I want to highlight that a number of speakers have already today, the historic significance of the recommendation that's coming out of HHS, the National Institute of Drug Abuse, and the Drug Enforcement Administration today to move cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. I know versions of this bill have come up before in the State House, but this is really the first time where we are sitting with a change in federal status. I think I encourage all of you to read at least the summary of the 250 pages that HHS put together, finding that there is a currently accepted medical use and a abuse potential lower than drugs in Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. I think it's important to say, in consideration of the South Carolina Compassionate Care Act, that a change to Schedule 3 does not legalize cannabis. It does allow researchers to have less regulatory burdens, and it does allow the DEA to no longer set production limits for medical cannabis. But I think important for this state, and for the considerations that come with Schedule 3, under South Carolina Code 4453-160, South Carolina follows the federal reclassification when the DEA and HHS put something on the federal schedules. Within 30 days, the state has to respond to a level that matches the federal classification. I say that because if we indeed move forward with a Schedule 3 recommendation, it would seem, at least in my interpretation, that the state would need to follow suit by matching that classification within the State Controlled Substances Act. I have heard some feedback from some witnesses today about seeking FDA approval for very specific parts of the cannabis plant. I think the reality is that when you look at cannabis and its hundreds of compounds and the great number of conditions across the United States is recommended for, over 150 as of today, having the FDA process work for the cannabis plant and even cannabis derivatives creates a system where you're going to have a lot of products not be able to be approved in a timely manner. Data from the FDA indicates that the average drug approval time is about 10.5 years. So if that was to happen for each individual cannabinoid, each individual part of the cannabis plant, we would be waiting hundreds and hundreds of years knowing about the bioavailability of the plant. And, I will keep my remarks brief, but I will also note that in the advance of the federal government putting forth a Schedule 3 rulemaking, I feel like we are in a similar position to where we were with the 2018 bill that dealt with hemp, the Agricultural Improvement Act. What that bill did was it allowed states to develop their own programs, or in the alternative, get the boilerplate language from the USDA well after several grow seasons had happened. I suspect we're going to be in the same scenario with the federal government with this current rulemaking with Schedule 3. When you look at the documents prepared by HHS, there's a lot of deference to state-level programs. When I think about what is right for South Carolina, is going to be very different than what's right for Colorado or California or New York, or even some of the other states that have moved forward with medical cannabis programs in the Southeast, like Georgia, Mississippi, and Alabama. I think there's an opportunity with the South Carolina Compassionate Care Act to move forward and regulate medical cannabis in a way that South Carolina feels appropriate, rather than being told by the federal government what is going to be appropriate for that state. So I will keep this brief. I know you have several other witnesses. I did prepare written remarks that I'm happy to submit to the committee. And again, with that, I'll also include the recommendation from HHS that encourages a reclassification from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3.
Thank you.
I'm happy to take questions.
Okay,
as well.
great. And if you could send us that information that you have, that would be very helpful. Do we have any questions? Mr. Sessions?
Thanks for your testimony. Thanks, Madam Chair. Can you tell us, I'm not familiar with, because it's recent, it happened earlier today, about the DEA recommendation. So walk me through that process.
Yes, sir. So the original process happens, the Health and Human Services Secretary will either by an outside petition, or in this case, the directive of the president, undergo an 8-factor analysis that looks at things like abuse potential, whether or not the drug is a precursor to other things already controlled on the Controlled Substances Act, the pharmacological effects of the drug. And so this analysis done by HHS is very scientific. And in fact, under the Controlled Substances Act at the federal level, the scientific and medical findings conducted by HHS are binding on the Drug Enforcement Agency. So where we are at this point in the process is the DEA conducts their own analysis, focusing primarily on abuse potential rather than medical use. So they'll look at things like diversion ability, sort of widespread non-therapeutic use, and a number of other factors within their own analysis. We don't have a historic example of the DEA rejecting a recommendation from HHS. So this shouldn't be all that surprising that they agreed to move forward with Schedule 3. But now that they have accepted that recommendation from HHS, the next step in the process is the Office of Management and Budget at the White House will conduct an analysis on whether there's an economic impact of over $100 million nationwide. They'll look at issues related to tribal sovereignty and federalism, and a few other discrete areas where there's executive orders that dictate OMB's involvement. So with the news today, where we are in that process is DEA has finished their analysis, concluding Schedule 3. HHS has finished their analysis, concluding Schedule 3. And now the next step is for this office within the White House to do its sort of own review over the next couple of weeks before this rule will be published for notice and comment in the Federal Register. When it's published in the Federal Register, there'll be the ability for stakeholders to submit public comment, public testimony, and then as that rule moves forward to get finalized, probably later this summer into the fall, that is when it will have the full weight and effect of being the law of the land at the federal level.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that explanation. We were in session today when the news of that potential change came out. And so we're going to have to do some homework and evaluate where that puts us and how that may or may not impact this legislation. So thank you. I appreciate those additional details.
Yes, ma'am, and I'll add that there's probably going to be additional guidance from other federal agencies in response to this decision by the DEA and HHS. The scheduling process itself is very narrow. It only does deal with those issues related to medical use and potential for abuse. It does not touch on some of the broader impacts of perhaps standardizing packaging and labeling, looking at issues related to access to financial services. So some of those other sort of issues that are dealt with directly and indirectly in the Compassionate Care Act may also have some additional feedback from other federal agencies over the next coming weeks and coming months.
All right, great. Thank you. We appreciate it. Have a nice afternoon.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the opportunity.
Next up, Jill Swing.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Jill Swing. I'm from Charleston, and I'm here to speak in support of S423, the Compassionate Care Act. I've been working on legalizing medical cannabis for the past 10 years, so it's been a long journey. I will try to make it as brief as I can. But this all began with I have twins, boy-girl twins who are now 16 years old. And my daughter was diagnosed with epilepsy when she was just prior to her second birthday. And I thought, great, because we noticed, with twins, we noticed some delays, some issues, and also this odd little thing she did with her head and her eyes that we didn't know. We thought it was a little tick. We didn't know what it was. So I thought, great, we'll get her on medication, we'll get it controlled, she'll stop having these issues, and, she'll be able to progress. Well, it was one medication and then another and another, and some of those medications made her seizures much worse. Anyway, fast forward to, so just like Miss St. Marie, my child was considered or refractory epilepsy, intractable epilepsy. And she didn't respond to pharmaceutical drugs. So in 2013, we saw the weed story by Sanjay Gupta, the CNN special, about the little girl in Colorado who had access to cannabis, but it was higher in CBD, lower in THC. And that sparked a trend across the country of moms like myself who wanted access to the CBD for our children. Now, you have to remember in 2014, there was no hemp, CBD, it was all marijuana and it was all Schedule I drug, okay? So, moms like myself started passing advocating for legislation, and so my daughter became basically the impetus for legalizing CBD in the state of South Carolina. That law was possession only, CBD only for epilepsy only. So what that did again, it's still Schedule I drug, right? So we all thought we could go out to Colorado where they had it legally and get it and bring it back for our kids. Well, first of all, you had to be a resident of Colorado. And so by changing our residency, our children would lose their benefits here. Like most of our kids are on Medicaid. So we would lose our state Medicaid, and also separating families, if that was a permanent move that had to be done. Beyond that, we would become drug traffickers if we brought the drug back to our home state of South Carolina. So this network of parents, and including myself, we started working on the black market, trying to find CBD oil for our children. And so many of those drugs, we didn't know what we were getting. We didn't know whether they were fit for human consumption, let alone whether they would have any therapeutic benefits. But, we didn't want our children to suffer, so we would do anything we could to try and help them. Long story short, we finally got educated. We got smart. We're like, okay, it needs to be labeled with a lab report. And so we got this product, and I gave it to my daughter. We were up with our family on vacation in Myrtle Beach. I gave it to her before she went to bed. And the next morning, my nonverbal child walked into the room and said, "Hi, everybody." She said it twice. And I thought, great, this is what we've been looking for. And so we were all excited. The crazy thing was another child was having an adverse effect, and every time she took the medication, the same medication I was giving my daughter that was helping her, she would have a seizure 30 minutes later. The parent became suspicious, sent a sample to another parent in a legal state who had access to a lab. They tested it. Now, keep in mind, we diluted it so we could do 10 milligrams of CBD per 1 milliliter of 1 milliliter solution of the oil is what we were giving, oil form. And that the concentrate that she sent up came back 92% THC, no traceable amount of CBD whatsoever. So we were not only then in possession of an illegal substance in our state, but we were giving our kids cancer meds, basically, except it was diluted. So it wasn't exactly the same thing. So anyway, with that, I began to think that it's possible that the THC might be more beneficial to my daughter. I took her to Maine so we could use it legally under a doctor's care and monitoring, and we stayed up there for a month so I could really test it and see how it worked. And it was really life-altering for her. So things that I wasn't anticipating, I was looking for seizure control, right? My daughter also has cerebral palsy, and so she's very floppy, low tone, and she could stand independently. She could sit by herself. I couldn't let her sit on the floor by herself because she would fall over. And this is when she was 9 years old. Anyway, so I have pictures of her standing. I'm not touching her, she's standing. I'll summarize. Anyway, so that was great because that, assured me that I was actually fighting for the right reasons. I have been working closely with Senator Davis on a lot of the wording of the language in this bill to assure that South Carolina the bill adopts the best practices for of things that we've gleaned from other states, as well as addressing some of the issues and problems that have come up in other states. So I'm very familiar with the bill, if anybody has any specific questions about the bill itself. And then I also wanted to share that I have since formed a small nonprofit, and we do medical cannabis education for communities and, you know, for our lawmakers. I have worked with MUSC in doing an annual medical cannabis update conference that is both CME and CLE accredited. And MUSC is the only state besides Harvard on the East Coast that provides that level of education for professionals. And I've also taken several lawmakers up to Maryland so that they can see firsthand how a regulated medical cannabis program works. We see a state-of-the-art cultivation facility, processing facility, dispensary, and we meet with several state lawmakers in Maryland so they can ask questions from their, you know, counterparts in another state who have been through this process, and also the commissioner of their program, who is more pro-regulation than pro-cannabis in general. So, and I'm not going to talk about my mom, who just died of cancer, but there are people who have talked about hospice care and the need for this in that period of life that's vital. So anyway, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Jill, thank you for your testimony, and thank you for your advocacy on behalf of your children and others. That's very brave and very notable. Do we have any questions for Jill? I don't think so. I think we know where to find you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Margaret Richardson.
And I'm not going to talk about my mom, who just died of cancer, but there are people who have talked about hospice care and the need for this in that period of life, that's vital.
Could you, if you're online, could you please mute the State House feed? I think that's got it fixed.
Who are we looking for?
Margaret Richardson.
If Margaret Richardson, or yes, okay. Well, you're up next. If you would like to go ahead, make sure you're unmuted.
Microphone is now active.
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Great.
Just go ahead when you're ready.
Oh, all right. First of all, thank you all for allowing me to speak today. My journey on supporting the Compassionate Care Act is about 6 years old. I was so excited at the beginning, thinking that we would soon have this legislation passed, but I've realized the value of the many years of deliberation I watched in the Senate. And today I really want to say thank you to those who are really conscientiously learning everything they can before making a decision about this bill. I watched the Senate for hours, debate, some of it very emotional, but a lot of it very deliberate. And people did their research, and people listened to testimonials, one from their Senator McLeod, from veterans, from people who were cancer victims, and so forth. But what I've noticed is a lot of the people who were against it initially changed their minds. And my daughter reminded me last night that given my situation, quickly a 2-second up to date, I was diagnosed with trigeminal neuralgia in 2014. And essentially, it's like having the side of your head lit on fire, and there's no relief. Sometimes you scream out loud. It's quite debilitating. And she told me, she said, "Mom, don't you remember when someone brought you medical cannabis," which was about 4 years later. She said, "No," I said, and I don't remember saying, no, I don't want to get stoned. No, I don't want to smoke pot." She said, "You were very resistant." And I sat and thought about the fact that I'm 68, since the 70s, that's over 50 years. I watched a lot of television and a lot of the narrative, and as we all know, the negative gets the news cycle. So I'm just grateful to Tom Davis and everyone else who did the deep digging to craft, to me, I think the most conservative medical cannabis bill probably in the country. And I'll tell you, since I have been prescribed a lot of pharmaceuticals, many of which I didn't want to take and couldn't take because of the ill side effects, I can tell you this bill, if you all pass it, will make it much more difficult to get medical cannabis than it is for me and many other patients to get opioids and other pain relieving meds. I was on opioids in 2015 for 5 months. I was so sick from what it did to my stomach. I weighed 113 pounds. I could not get out of the bed. So the long and the short of it is, I had to quit taking them. And fast forward to today, I now go to the Cleveland Clinic every 3 months. I get 25 injections in my face and in all these nerves. It calms down some of the trigeminal neuralgia burn. The rest of it is supported by wires in my face, my head, my chest. And 85% of them are burned out. So I'm on a time bomb, ticking time bomb. When it burns out, which could be any day now, I don't know what will happen to me. The only thing I've ever used that doesn't cause me ill side effects is a vape pen of medical cannabis because very little gives quick and immediate relief. I can't speak to the specifics of the other many people, but I know if you want to hear them testify, you can. But I'm left, as many of them are, to either take nothing and suffer or risk something off of the streets, which is so dangerous now. A lot of that's laced with fentanyl and other dangerous drugs. So at this point, I just implore you to please send S243 to the House so that the full body of legislators can give it the vetting and hopefully the support that the Senate did after 6 years of conscientious deliberation at the very least. So thank you. I appreciate it, and I'm very hopeful that those of us in the state of South Carolina with legitimate need at the end of this session will have access to very carefully regulated medical cannabis. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Richardson. We appreciate your testimony and we appreciate your time this afternoon. Does anyone have any questions? I don't believe so. Thank you. Have a nice afternoon.
You also. Goodbye.
Next up is Tori Fields. Tony? Tori, okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. It's great to be here. Even a little rain outside, but it's good to be here. Tori Fields from Charleston, South Carolina. Happy to be here once again in the State House. I, along with Jill, has been fighting this fight for the last 7 years, coming here, trying to get this thing taken care of. And one thing I always learned of being inside Columbia is you always hear when the military come up, you always hear people say, thank you for your service to all our military men who have served this country proudly, who have been overseas, who have fought in the Iraq War and all of our country's war. We always tell them, thank you for your service. Even after they asked up here, we've been there 6 years fighting to try to get them some relief. We shake their hands, thank you for your service, and then the bill goes nowhere. I hope this year is a change. We've heard all excuses. Well, if the feds don't do it, we're not. The feds have done it. They've done it today. We hope that this time around, we can get some change. The problem is, if I get the optics and understand that, but the problem is the opioid use isn't going to stop. As long as this bill stays on the sidelines, people, children, I'm not talking about people, I'm talking about children. Horry County, the kid that played baseball, got hurt on a Friday night, Saturday baseball game, went to the hospital at 18, got on opioids and hadn't got off him. Last his mother saw him, he was 21. She found him in his room dead from opioids. We have to put a stop to opioid abuse in South Carolina. It's high time. We have a viable option. We have an option that people aren't walking around like zombies. They're not lethargic. They're not bedridden. They can have a quality of life. So I'm asking again that this session, you group of legislators, that when you say next year, thank you for your service, that those servicemen who have fought, given parts of their bodies, parts of their minds up for this country, will look back at you and say, you know what? Thank you for your service, for getting this bill passed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We appreciate that. No questions? We'll go on to the next person. Mr. Greg Glad, I believe. I'm sorry, did I pronounce that correctly? Yeah, if you would unmute for us, please.
Oh, no, you did get it.
Okay,
I wasn't berating your pronunciation.
Okay, great.
Rarely do people get on the first go, so feel very
Thank you for being here this
Thank you so much.
afternoon.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Madam Chair, and thank you for the rest of the committee members. My name is Greg Glad. I am the Senior Criminal Justice and Public Safety Fellow at Americans for Prosperity. I work at our headquarters here in Arlington, Virginia, but you probably know many of my colleagues that work in state, Candace Carroll, Hannah Selly, to name a couple. So really excited to discuss this issue today. Our basis on this, we're supporting the bill. We have been for quite some time. I won't belabor kind of those reasons, those have been on the record, but want to really dig into a little bit of the implications of what occurred today. And I know the gentleman before, I believe his first name's David Magnon, I also put an Italian spin on that as well, discussed a lot of the implications, but want to just kind of quickly touch on a few others as well. Just from a point of view from our standpoint, we do feel that this is generally a good step in the right direction. If the federal government actually decides after the public commenting and rulemaking period to approve this to go from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, it's ideal over the status quo. But it would still kind of continue this piecemeal operation that we're seeing today, where state laws are still essentially in conflict with federal laws, where they can still enforce criminal offenses on Schedule 3 drugs. The penalties will likely change and things like that can happen, but there's still a long slough to go, rather than just going full descheduling at the federal level, allowing states such as South Carolina to do what makes more sense and allows it not to go to unelected bureaucrats within the federal government. So I'll pause there with that. The timeline and kind of some of the implications just on different things and what's going on. From a medical standpoint, some of the things that kind of you want to consider as we see this federal reshift probably occurring at the end of the year. It would not make it legally available as a prescription drug, and so we've kind of heard a lot of that. It'd only be products that are approved by the FDA. How health insurance companies, federally and in state, how they handle medical cannabis reimbursements. Substances, this is kind of the first time we've ever seen this with a substance. This is the first time that something's been categorized as a Schedule 3 drug that hasn't gone through initial FDA approval. And so there is essentially more questions than answers at this point when we look at a lot of the medical aspects that we're going to see, either from insurance or the actual care that you're receiving, particularly from Medicaid, Medicare, and things like that, reimbursements. We discussed some of the research stuff. Obviously this is going to be very helpful. There has been already loopholes enacted legislatively since 2022 to allow for a kind of a carve out for marijuana research that would essentially allow for what Schedule 3 is, almost a parallel track. So I don't think there's actually going to be that much of a difference on the research aspect, but it will help a little bit. When we look at banking, obviously, under federal tax code, I believe it's 280E, businesses involved in marijuana can't deduct rent, payroll, or various other expenses. Some people say that those expenses can be up to 70% or more. That deduction rule doesn't apply to Schedule 3 drugs, so cannabis-related companies could write those off as taxes that they've been barred before if they have been paying federal taxes on this as it is. Some of the things that we're going to continue to see is federal amendments and maybe federal drug testing laws and local and state drug testing laws. I know that's been a major point of conversation in states that have gone legalized around either recreationally, medical, or both. And that'll continue to happen. And we're going to see that with federal things, where particularly with South Carolina's that have to go through federal background checks and things like that. That's a significant impact on how that's going to determine the labor force within the state nationally as well. And then we're going to still see kind of the criminal complications that we have, because this is not going to address that conflict between state laws that allow for medical or recreational use. those businesses would still have trouble obtaining financial services. They would still be subject to criminal penalties, potentially civil forfeiture. Outcomes that recreational marijuana aspirers avoid, well, I think it's essentially prosecutorial discretion. A lot of the times is really how this works. I live in DC. I see violations of the law every time I walk past. It's just essentially they will not enforce these things because it still lives in this quasi world. We don't see that within the alcohol industry because we know exactly where that is. It's much more of a food and drug health and safety issue. So you don't go to a liquor store and then one next door where it's just a bunch of random things that they're putting things in. Liquor store essentially, regardless where you go, it's going to be the same exact things because it lives solely in one place. When it lives in this gray area of almost regulatory purgatory between the criminal justice system and kind of the more civil administrative regulatory bodies, this is where you see that gray market really start to proliferate. Because it's kind of everyone's pointing at each other, like you handle it, no, you handle it, and then no one handles it. So there's a bill that might pass through called the Safe Banking Act at the federal level that would provide some of these shelters as well. And so that may potentially happen. But those are some of the things that we see. We kind of think that this could be a proliferation of kind of the piecemeal work that we've done, but it is definitely going to open up some areas for reform that should be considered if South Carolina is going to take that leap into the medical cannabis market. So I will pause there. Happy to answer any questions. And thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for Greg? I think we're good for right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate your time this afternoon.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Next up, we have Wade Tullison. Good afternoon. Good.
My name is Wade Tullison. I'd like to thank the chamber today for having me, letting me speak. A little bit taller, so sometimes the mics don't reach. I was born in Spartanburg, moved to Anderson later on. I'm here, like I said, in support of the Compassionate Care Act because I am a little bit younger, kind of the target age that everybody's talking about nowadays. I've been on opioids since I was 20 years old because I have degenerative disc disease. I've blown out my lower two discs, L4 to L5 and L5 to S1. They've been repaired 3 times, have yet to actually heal themselves. They failed within a month of each surgery. And every time I go to a doctor, I've been to 3 or 4 different doctors now, they only can say, here's gabapentin, here's Flexeril, here's oxycodone, hydrocodone. They can only throw pills at me, or sometimes we do physical therapy, which is a little bit, it helps a little, but not enough to actually go through my day and feel good. I was a medical cannabis asylum seeker when I went to California a few years ago because one of my cousins who lived out there actually worked in the medical cannabis industry. He told me that, if I kept going down this road of using the prescribed medication that I would not see past 50 years old. So I go out there and he showed me that medical cannabis is legitimately a medicine. I was off my opioids within, I want to say, a month. I did not have hardly as severe withdrawal symptoms because of it. And my big part to it all was that even though I have doctors that will look me dead in the eye and tell me that medical cannabis would be better for me in the long run, they say that their hands are tied and they're not allowed to make any decisions that could actually help me because there's nothing available. So basically my future looks like either living with more degenerative discs and a lot of pain, or they want to do double, triple fusions, and at 26 I won't be able to even pick up a child. It really hurts, especially because I'm yet to be a father, and that kind of impacts my whole life and my decisions on how I want to live my life. To me, S423 was the door to opening up medical freedom. I just feel that nowadays our medical system is so tied up in legal red tape that you really don't find any kind of treatment that actually helps you anymore. It's, you go one problem for another. I've had more side effects with the medication that's been given to me than any kind of help that I've seen. Here lately, I know that the the DEA has rescheduled to Schedule 3. I personally think that is a good move, a good step forward. Of course, eventually we want to deschedule, but With that being said, the federal government has now moved to actually say that, yes, this is medicine. And I think this year, and especially happening right now before we close, is kind of a sign from upstairs that we need the options. I don't genuinely believe that I would be able to be here, standing here today, if I wouldn't have had medical cannabis. I think one of my doctors told me that my liver, if I were to keep on the 15 milligrams of Oxycontin 4 times a day that I was on to try to help my pain, he said I would have to be on dialysis at 40. And as a young person, I don't know how to, react to that because everybody tells me I'm in the youth of my life. So I come up here today because I want to show that, the youth are getting prescribed these medications that it's not that they're not supposed to be, it's not in coordinates of actually a long-term health plan. It's all short-term solutions for permanent problems. To this day, I don't think that I've gone a day without some kind of CBD, and I can tell you since I started the CBD, the Delta, and I actually went to California, I've had more days where I'm actually able to, do the daily tasks that I'm not able to when I'm not using that medicine. And I found quality of life again. And for me, that was really hard because there towards the third year of all the back surgeries and opioid medication, I had lost all hope to live. I was ready to go, didn't really care about anything. And so to find something that actually helped gave me almost a little bit of a kick up, a pep up, because I genuinely believe that we can actually bring medical freedom to South Carolina and that we can bring these patients something that will not innately hurt them in the end. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing your healthcare journey with us. I wish you the very best in your you're trying to find that that thing that works for you. So, thank you for being here. Next, we have Jeremy Murphy.
Hey.
Hi.
Hey. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Jeremy Murphy. I'm a Lyme disease patient in Greenville. My doctor practices in Virginia, and I work with Jill Swing at the South Carolina Compassionate Care Alliance. My doctor's treatment has helped bring me close to complete remission from the disfiguring skin condition Morgellons, which causes slow-healing skin lesions to form all across the body. These ulcerations are not self-inflicted, but because of the lack of education about Lyme disease, doctors often wrongly attribute the dermopathy to mental illness. Lyme disease is shown to be associated with several medical conditions, including cardiovascular disease, mental health conditions, including treatment-resistant depression, anxiety, and psychosis, cancer, autism, aggressive behavior, ischemic stroke, and chronic pain at any age. The standard tests for Lyme disease are reportedly between 40 to 60% accurate, meaning a patient can test negative, but still harbor the infection. Our CDC states the incidence of Lyme disease is approaching 500,000 cases every year. Yet Lyme disease is rarely considered by even our best doctors. My doctor, as stated, is well out of state. Medical marijuana has several reported applications for Lyme patients, of whom it is demonstrated that 20% on average do not respond to conventional treatment. Concerning S423, first, marijuana is produced into hundreds of strains, each capable of addressing specific conditions. Because people develop a tolerance, a variety of strains are typically available in dispensaries, allowing patients to change to a different phenotype that produces similar medical effects. This legislation prevents patients from knowing what strain is in their medicine and from changing to a different strain when they inevitably develop tolerance. Second, science has shown that smoking whole flower marijuana is the most effective administration for chronic pain. Studies have also demonstrated that highly concentrated THC products, up to 98%, do not result in increased altered mental status. This evidence suggests that it's not solely THC which produces marijuana-specific effects, but rather the combination of compounds present in the whole plant that target unique medical conditions. A recent large-scale study concluded that recreational marijuana users experience significantly less subjective cognitive decline. Finally, I am concerned that this bill will create an overreaching police force tasked with eradicating unlawful marijuana while government-approved cannabis-based derivatives are sold. Not only does this restrictive legislation outlaw the very flower used in creating said products, but it also provides justification to ruin the lives of those who don't qualify under this program but still benefit from marijuana. In this bill, the government controls the means of production, allowing special individuals to profit while utilizing extreme enforcement to deter any free market capitalists. This flower should be sold at our local farmers markets. Thank you for letting me speak. I would love to field any questions, and I'll be happy to submit the sources of my citations to the committee.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Do we have any questions for Mr. Murphy? Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Next up is Mike Harvey. Good afternoon.
How are you? So it's kind of hard to write a speech and then talk at the end. So I want to cover on two of the patients have MS. So we've talked about the low amounts of research that have gone into different conditions. According to the research dashboard, there are 144 primary studies just on MS alone. That's 21 double-blind studies, which is the best studies you're going to get. That's with the placebo and stuff. Currently, in the UK, if I had MS, I could use a drug called Sativex, which is 2.7 milligrams of THC, 2.5 milligrams of CBD. It's a 1-to-1, and it's a spray. We do not have that here. The question is why? When we look at the research across the world, your 7 biggest countries, Germany, Canada, Israel, have done cannabis research. We know where the medical capabilities are, yet we have allowed the FDA to slow roll this. We know that using cannabis does modulate the CB1 and CB2 receptors, reducing central and peripheral pain, spasticity, inflammation, urinary incontinence, improved quality of life and insomnia, among other things. I did send you the certificate of analysis because I know the questions come up about the safety of cannabis. So hopefully you have it. So, in the certificate of analysis, they will look at the different cannabinoids in that drug, in the cannabis. They will also look for heavy metals. They will look for pesticides, residual solvents, molds and mildew. It's just as when you do it in the good manufacturing process, it's just as safe as any FDA approved drug. In fact, if you look at the FDA approved drugs that are recalled on a regular basis, it's because other chemicals have been added or mistakes, such as instead of giving a 25 milligram pill, you may get a 50 milligram pill. It happens. Medical cannabis community is attempting to make sure that we have a safe product. Speaking as a veteran, it is very, very important that we have one more access to another drug that does not have the same troublesome problems such as the opiate addiction. It's getting harder and harder for veterans to get certain meds because of the addiction and the overdose. It is time that this state passes medical cannabis to take care of our patients. Specifically, I'm speaking on our veteran population. I won't waste any more of your time. I know that you've had a long week.
Thank you. If there's any additional information you can send us, that would be good. Okay. Thank you. Next up, Thomas Blackwood. Thomas Blackwood? Nope. Nope, let's go to the next one.
You must step away. Don Howell.
Next up, Don Howell. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. It's been a long afternoon, I know. I appreciate you being here.
No problem. You've had a lot of, well, first of all, thank you for your indulgence, Madam Speaker, members of the board here. You've heard a lot of testimony from a lot of people here today, and they've mentioned a lot of things that I was going to mention next time. I'll be first. But a little bit about me. I'm a veteran of the...
Yes, ma'am. 1 second. I apologize. Let me pause this. Can you hear me?
Who goes first?
We can, if you would, we went ahead and brought someone else up. So if you can just hang on for the duration of his testimony, we'll get right back to you, okay?
All right, thank you.
All right, anyway, I've been in the Navy for 22 years. I spent most of my time with the Marine Corps as a medical asset, basically battlefield medicine. Since then, I became a registered nurse, and I'm a critical care nurse even as we speak. I've suffered from PTSD. One of the main issues that I tend to have amongst the many that you've already heard of is sleep. Since the age of 21, when I first started, came back from Beirut, Lebanon, I didn't get any sleep. I slept maybe about 2 or 3 hours a night. And that's a bad thing, particularly because it puts me at risk for dementia. It wasn't until a couple of years ago that I started using cannabis, ingesting it as a gummy in order to sleep. And it worked wonders. To further prove that, I have another, I call her my patient, another female who suffers from cancer, and she's going through a lot of chemotherapy, et cetera, and she also suffers from sleep, as well as another Army nurse who's retired, who's also seen combat. And I shared my gummies with them, and the results were wonderful. The only complaint that I had was one guy had a hangover. The point I'm trying to make is that when we use cannabis, we have to use it safely. When I make my gummies, I make them low dose so that a lay person could possibly increase them incrementally and not have bad effects. Microdosing is what can make medical cannabis in South Carolina safe. Microdosing is, what was mentioned earlier before, is taking small doses until you have that needed effect. Once you have that needed effect, you stop. When you use edibles, they tend to last 8 hours. They go from a Delta 9 to a Delta 11 because that's how it's processed after it meets the digestive system. And that could be very helpful for those people who suffer from malignant insomnia like I do. I am a result of what happens after 40 years of living with PTSD. You've heard all the negative, bad dreams, et cetera else, but sleep is one of the major things that could be a problem for us. I indulge that you support this bill. It's been a lifesaver for me. It's been a game changer for the two people that I've shared my gummies with, per se. And it's not something that I would do unless there was a good reason to. I'm not a drug dealer, and I'm certainly not doing this just for entertainment. I'm 62 years old, and those days of partying is well behind me. So it's important that I say that because this is a very serious thing for me and a lot of other people as well. I've been working with you all and Compassionate Care of South Carolina since 2017, trying to move this bill forward. Each year we get a little bit closer, but then there's always been disappointments. But I hope that this time will be a good one. I'm thankful that, thankfully, the DHEC has changed the schedule of the drug to Schedule 3, and that certainly will change a lot of minds on the board and at least the view of the cannabis. So having said all of that, I don't really want to waste too much of your time. I do want to say that I've been working in the ICU since I was 19 years old. And I've seen a lot of patients from opioid overdose to alcohol overdoses. And I've never once seen one that was related to cannabis. And I'm a damn good nurse. And I know what I see. So I know you're going to hear a lot of people, proponents and so forth, but I'm here to tell you that being bedside, unlike Dr. Lynch, who's I think it was the doctor of pharmacy. He's not on the bedside like I am for 12 hours. And I've worked with doctors of pharmacy in the ICU. They are afraid to come to the ICU to touch our patients because how critical they are. They stand from afar. Having said that, thank you for your indulgence. Please move forward with this bill. Thank you very much, unless you have any questions.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing your testimony with us.
Thank you. All right,
We appreciate it. Thank you for your patience again. So we're going to go back to Thomas Blackwell. Thomas, are you online?
Yes, ma'am.
Great.
My name is Thomas Blackwood Jr. I stand not only as a deeply rooted South Carolinian and a 100% disabled veteran, but also as a parent to a special needs child with Smith-Magenis syndrome. An ordeal that has not only shown me the depths of human suffering, but the dire need for compassionate care options. It's important to note that the majority of South Carolinians seem to support this bill. Yet despite this overwhelming support, there remains staunch opposition within this chamber. We must question who our elected officials truly representing with their votes. The people of South Carolina who desperately seek relief, or the interest of influential donors who benefit from maintaining the status quo. The persistence of this opposition against the clear will of the people suggests a disheartening alignment with external interest, rather than the majority of South Carolinians who are calling for change and help. As expected, we've heard significant opposition again and again from law enforcement. Chief Keel has repeatedly expressed concerns regarding the potential for leading to recreational use and the risk of black market proliferation. While these concerns are valid from a law enforcement perspective, they do not address the immediate needs of many South Carolinians suffering daily. He states, marijuana is illegal. It's a Schedule I controlled substance, which means it has no medical benefit. This contrasts sharply with the numerous states and countries where medical cannabis has provided undeniable relief. Attorney General Wilson argues that medical cannabis is the most misunderstood drug and expresses concerns over its impact on teenagers and societal norms. While it is crucial to regulate and control any medication to prevent misuse, it is equally crucial to allow the right to access treatments that can significantly improve their quality of life. Furthermore, these arguments are frankly nonsensical and disingenuous. This stance conveniently ignores the reality that legally prescribed medications are diverted to the black market every day, and minors frequently obtain alcohol, tobacco, etc., despite regulations. Are we to believe that our current system is flawless, or are these merely obstacles put forth to stall progress? If the people of South Carolina eventually decide they want recreational marijuana, they can express that will through the process of our republic. It's high time we stop pretending these are genuine concerns rather than bureaucratic hiccups meant to obstruct a bill that promises substantial relief to countless individuals. I stand having witnessed firsthand how the current system fails to protect or even consider the most vulnerable, like my traumatized child, whose abuse case was unfounded by those meant to protect him, some already named. The opposition mentions the potential for misuse, but what about their misuse of authority when the needs of the vulnerable are ignored? I concur that denying this option is akin to denying relief from pain and suffering. Retired Chief Jeffrey Moore provided testimony on how cannabis had saved his son's life, offering relief from PTSD. These individuals are not potential criminals. They are patients fighting every day for normalcy and relief. In conclusion, I urge our legislators to consider the overwhelming evidence and support. I implore y'all to act with urgency and integrity. If amendments wish to be raised, let them be addressed post-passage. In the feigned ignorance and stonewalling that has characterized this debate for far too long, you are here to serve the people, not just those who align with certain political interests. Let us prioritize compassion over politics and allow those suffering the relief they so desperately need and deserve. Thank you for considering my testimony. Dum spiro spero. While I breathe, I hope.
Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. Appreciate your patience this afternoon, and thank you very much.
That concludes our testimony. Yeah, 27.
Everyone, that concludes our testimony for today. We had 27 testimonies, so and we had a good distribution of ideas and thoughts and backgrounds. At this point, we'll be adjourned.